The bullet wasn't meant for him. It was meant for the woman in red, a stranger whose name he didn't know, whose life he had no reason to protect. But when Eli Turner saw the gun rise, something deeper than thought took over. 1 second, he was a father heading home. The next, he was bleeding on Chicago pavement, staring up at tear-filled eyes that would change everything. This is their story. Stay until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain had started just after sunset, turning the streets of downtown Chicago into ribbons of black glass that reflected the neon glow of storefronts and traffic lights. Eli Turner had always liked the city at night, not because it was beautiful, though sometimes it was, but because it felt honest. During the day, Chicago wore its best face. Tourists snapping photos by the Bean, business people in sharp suits rushing between meetings, street musicians playing for crowds that barely noticed them. But at night, the masks came off. The city showed you what it really was, a place where people struggled and survived, where every block held a story, and where nothing ever came easy. Eli knew that truth better than most. At 33, he'd lived more lives than some people twice his age. He'd been a high school dropout, a college freshman, a soldier, a wounded veteran, a construction worker, and for the past 6 years, the single father of a little girl who meant more to him than anything else in the world. His daughter, Lila, was 7 years old with wild curls that never stayed in place and a smile that could light up the darkest room. She was the reason he got up at 5 every morning, the reason he worked 12-hour shifts hauling steel and pouring concrete, the reason he kept going when his back ached and his bank account ran dry. Tonight was supposed to be simple. He'd finished his shift at the construction site on the south side around 7, cleaned up in the portable bathroom that always smelled like bleach and regret, and headed to his truck, a 15-year-old Ford that rattled when it hit 40 but still ran, which was all that mattered. The plan was to grab Lila from his mother's apartment in Pilsen, swing by the taco place she loved, and spend the evening watching whatever animated movie she'd been talking about all week. Simple. Easy. The kind of Friday night that made the hard weeks worth it. But God, or fate, or whatever force moved the pieces of people's lives around like chess pieces on an invisible board, had different plans. Eli was 3 blocks from his mother's building when he realized he'd left Lila's backpack in the cab of his truck. She needed it for a birthday party tomorrow, her best friends, a girl named Sophia who lived in the same building and who Lila had been talking about non-stop for days. The backpack had the present inside. A stuffed unicorn with a rainbow mane that Lila had picked out herself, spending 20 minutes in the toy store weighing the options with the seriousness of a Supreme Court justice, forgetting it wasn't an option. Lila would be disappointed, and disappointing his daughter was something Eli tried never to do. So he turned around, headed back toward the construction site, cursing himself for being careless, for being tired, for being human. The streets were quieter now, the rush hour traffic giving way to the evening lull before the nightlife crowds emerged. He parked in the same spot he'd left an hour ago, grabbed the backpack from behind the passenger seat, and was about to leave when his phone buzzed. A text from his mother. Lila fell asleep early. Poor thing wore herself out. Come by tomorrow morning instead? Eli smiled, texting back a thumbs up. That meant he had time. Time to breathe. Time to stop being in a hurry for once. There was a cafe across the street, a small place called The Winding Road that he'd passed 100 times but never entered. It looked warm inside, golden light spilling through the windows, people sitting at small tables with laptops and coffee cups. On impulse, he decided to go in. 1 coffee. 1 moment of peace before heading home to his empty apartment and the pile of bills on the kitchen counter. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. The smell hit him immediately. Roasted coffee beans, cinnamon, something baking in the back. A young woman behind the counter with purple hair and a nose ring smiled at him. What can I get you? Black coffee, Eli said. Large. You got it. Anything else? We've got fresh banana bread. He almost said no. He'd been watching his spending, trying to save enough to get Lila a real birthday party next month. Maybe rent a bounce house like the other kids had. But the banana bread smelled incredible, and he'd skipped lunch. Sure, why not? He paid, dropped his change in the tip jar, and found a seat by the window. The cafe wasn't crowded, just a couple of college students with textbooks spread across a corner table, an older man reading a newspaper, and a woman in business clothes typing furiously on her phone. Eli sipped his coffee and watched the street outside. Rain streaked the glass. A taxi splashed through a puddle. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. This was his city, messy and beautiful and brutal and kind, often all at once. He didn't know he was watching the last peaceful moment of his old life. Across the street, beyond the rain and the traffic and the glowing streetlights, a woman stepped out of a restaurant. Eli noticed her immediately, not because he was looking for her, but because she was impossible not to notice. She wore a dress the color of fresh blood, elegant and flowing, the kind of thing you saw in magazines or on red carpets. Her dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders, and even from a distance, even through rain-streaked glass, there was something about the way she moved, graceful, confident, like she knew exactly who she was and didn't apologize for it. She stood under the restaurant awning for a moment, checking her phone, then stepped out into the rain without an umbrella. Eli wondered briefly where she was going, what her story was. Everyone had one. Maybe she was heading to meet someone. Maybe she just had the best meal of her life or the worst date. Maybe she was celebrating something or running from something or just trying to get home like everyone else. He'd never know. Or so he thought. That's when he saw the man in the black hoodie. At first, nothing about him seemed unusual, just another person on the street, hands in his pockets, hood pulled up against the rain. But something in the way he moved caught Eli's attention. Too deliberate, too focused. The man was walking parallel to the woman in red, maintaining distance but matching her pace. Eli's instincts, honed by 2 tours in Afghanistan and 6 years of raising a kid alone in a city that didn't always play fair, started whispering warnings. He set down his coffee and leaned forward, watching. The woman reached the corner and paused, waiting for the light to change. The man in the hoodie closed the distance. Eli's chest tightened. He told himself he was being paranoid, that he'd seen too much combat, that not every shadow held a threat. The light changed. The woman started across the street, and the man pulled out a gun. Everything happened in the space between heartbeats. The man raised the pistol, small, dark, lethal, and leveled it at the woman's back. She didn't see it. She was halfway across the street, focused on her phone, oblivious to the fact that her life was about to end. Other people on the sidewalk started screaming, scattering, pulling out phones. But no one moved toward her. No one stepped in. Everyone did what people are supposed to do when guns appear. They ran away, they ducked. They protected themselves. Eli didn't think. There wasn't time to think. Later, he'd try to explain it and fail, because how do you explain the moment when your body moves before your brain catches up? How do you put into words the thing that happens when you see someone in danger and the civilized part of you, the part that calculates risk and considers consequences, just shuts off, and something older, something primal, takes the wheel? He was out of his seat and through the cafe door before he consciously decided to move. The rain hit his face. Car horns blared. Someone shouted, "Gun! He's got a gun!" Eli's boots hit the wet pavement and he ran, not away from the danger, but straight toward it. The woman in red had stopped in the middle of the street, finally realizing something was wrong, finally seeing the gun pointed at her. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She was frozen, a deer in headlights, and the man with the gun was squeezing the trigger. Eli hit her like a linebacker, wrapping his arms around her waist and driving her sideways. They went down together in a tangle of limbs and soaked fabric, hitting the asphalt hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. The gun fired, a sharp crack that split the night, and Eli felt something punch into his left shoulder, a sensation that didn't hurt at first, just felt hot and wrong and oddly distant. They skidded to a stop against a parked car. The woman was underneath him, gasping, her red dress dark with rain and street grime. Eli tried to push himself up, tried to see if she was okay, but his left arm wouldn't cooperate. He looked down and saw blood, a lot of it, spreading across his shirt in a dark stain that looked black under the streetlights. "Oh, God," the woman whispered. "Oh, God, you're shot. You're shot." Eli wanted to tell her he was fine, but the words wouldn't come. The pain arrived all at once, like someone had shoved a hot poker through his shoulder and was twisting it. His vision blurred. He heard footsteps running, more screams, the sound of the gunmen fleeing. Somewhere distant, Sirens wailed. The woman scrambled out from under him and pressed her hands against his shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding. Her face hovered above his, framed by wet dark hair and the glow of streetlights. She was crying. "Stay with me," she said. "Please stay with me. Help is coming. You're going to be okay." Eli tried to focus on her face, tried to commit it to memory, because some part of him understood that this moment mattered, that everything was about to change. Her eyes were dark, brown or maybe green, he couldn't tell, and filled with fear and something else. Gratitude? Guilt? Both? "What's your name?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Please tell me your name." "Eli," he managed. "Eli Turner." "I'm Vivian," she said. "Vivian Cross, and Her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "Don't be," Eli whispered. "Just stay safe." His vision was narrowing now, the world shrinking to just her face, and the rain and the distant sound of sirens getting closer. He thought about Lila, about how she was going to wake up tomorrow expecting him to be there, expecting banana pancakes and cartoons and the promise of a birthday party, about how scared she'd be if something happened to him, about how he couldn't leave her alone in this world. But the darkness was pulling him down, gentle and insistent, and he didn't have the strength to fight it. The last thing he saw before everything went black was Vivian's face, her tears mixing with rain, her lips moving in words he couldn't hear. And the last thing he thought was, "I hope that was worth it. I hope she lives a good life." Then, nothing. Fade to black. 3 days later. Eli woke up to the smell of antiseptic and the sound of machines beeping. For a confused moment, he thought he was back in Kandahar, in the field hospital after the IED blast that had ended his military career. But the bed was softer than he remembered, and the light coming through the window was wrong, gray Chicago light, not Afghan sun. His shoulder throbbed with a deep, bone-level ache that made him wince. He tried to move his left arm and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through him like electricity, sharp enough to make his vision swim. A hand touched his right arm, gentle, familiar. "Easy, mijo. Don't move too fast," his mother's voice. Eli turned his head and saw her sitting beside the bed, her face lined with worry and exhaustion. Maria Turner was 62 years old, with gray-streaked black hair pulled back in a practical bun, and hands that had worked in hospital laundry for 30 years. She looked like she hadn't slept since he'd been admitted. "Mom," Eli croaked. His throat felt like sandpaper. "How long?" "3 days," she said, squeezing his hand. "You've been in and out. The doctors said you were lucky. The bullet missed anything vital, but you lost a lot of blood. They had to do surgery." 3 days. Eli closed his eyes, processing. "Lila?" "She's fine. She's with your sister. I didn't tell her everything, just that you got hurt at work and you're going to be okay. She made you a card. Want to see it?" Eli nodded. His mother pulled a folded piece of construction paper from her purse and handed it to him. He opened it with his good hand. The front had a crayon drawing of him and Lila holding hands, with a rainbow overhead and the words, "Get well, Daddy," in uneven letters. Inside, in his sister's handwriting, Lila says you're the bravest person in the world, and she loves you infinity times infinity. Come home soon. His eyes stung. He folded the card carefully and set it on the bedside table. "I'm okay, Mom. I promise." "You got shot saving a stranger," Maria said, and there was something in her voice, not anger, not judgment, but a complicated mix of pride and frustration and fear. "The nurses told me. They said you ran into gunfire. Eli, what were you thinking?" "I wasn't," he admitted. "I just saw her, saw the gun, and I moved." His mother shook her head, but she was smiling slightly, that sad, knowing smile mothers give their children when they've done something stupid and brave and completely in character. "Your father would have done the same thing. God rest him." Eli's father had been a firefighter, killed in a warehouse blaze when Eli was 16. He'd run into a burning building to save 3 people and never come back out. Eli had spent years angry about that, angry that his father had chosen strangers over his own family, angry that heroism had orphaned him. But somewhere along the way, the anger had faded into understanding. Some people were just wired differently. They couldn't watch someone suffer without trying to help, even if it cost them everything. Has anyone else been here? Eli asked. The police? Police came yesterday. Took your statement while you were half awake. I don't think you'll remember. They said the shooter got away, but they're still looking. And Maria paused, something complicated crossing her face. The woman you saved. She's been here. Eli's heart jumped. She has? Every single day. Multiple times. The nurses said she tried to stay in your room the first night until they kicked her out. She brings flowers, food, coffee for the staff. Yesterday, she tried to pay your hospital bills, and the administration had to explain 3 times that insurance already covered it. Maria chose her words carefully. She's very grateful and very persistent. Is she here now? She just left about an hour ago. Said she'd come back this evening. Eli, there's something you should know about her. The door opened. A nurse came in, smiled when she saw Eli awake, and started checking his vitals. Well, hello there, Mr. Hero. How are you feeling? Like I got shot, Eli said. The nurse laughed. That's about right. Pain level, 1 to 10. 6, maybe 7 when I move. I'll get you something for that. The doctor wants to see you now that you're fully conscious. And FYI, there's about a dozen reporters in the lobby hoping for a statement. You're kind of famous. What? Why? The nurse gave him a look that said, Are you serious? You took a bullet for a complete stranger in Chicago, at night, during a robbery. The story's been all over the news. Hero construction worker saves mysterious woman in red. You're trending on Twitter. Eli's stomach sank. He hated attention, hated being in the spotlight. He'd seen what happened to viral heroes, the scrutiny, the judgment, people dissecting every aspect of your life. Can I just not talk to them? Hospital policy is we can't force you to make statements. Your mom's been running interference like a champ. The nurse adjusted his IV. But heads up, the woman you saved. She's giving a press conference tonight. Pretty sure she's going to talk about you. After the nurse left, Eli looked at his mother. Who is she? Maria pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, and handed it to him. On the screen was a news article. Billionaire CEO nearly killed in downtown shooting, saved by mystery man. Eli stared at the headline, then at the photo below it. It was her, the woman in red. But she looked different here, not scared or crying, but poised and powerful, standing in front of a glass building with Cross Enterprises in silver letters behind her. The article described her as Vivian Cross, 36 years old, CEO of one of the Midwest's largest real estate development companies, estimated net worth of $2.3 billion. Billion. With a B. Jesus, Eli whispered. That's what I said, his mother replied. You saved a billionaire, Eli, and from what the nurses tell me, she's not planning to forget it. Eli scrolled through the article. It detailed the shooting, how Vivian had been leaving a business dinner, how a would-be robber had targeted her, how an unidentified construction worker had intervened and been shot. Police were still searching for the gunman. Vivian had issued a statement. I owe my life to a man whose name I don't even know yet. When I find him, I intend to thank him properly. He closed his eyes. This was too much. All he'd done was what anyone should do, what he'd been trained to do in the army, what his father had died doing. It wasn't supposed to be a news story. It wasn't supposed to turn his life upside down. She seems nice, his mother offered. Intense, but nice. She asked a lot about you, about Lila, about whether you needed anything. I think she wants to help. I don't need her help, Eli said automatically. Then he thought about his bank account, about the bills on his counter, about the fact that he'd just lost at least a week of work and construction companies didn't offer paid sick leave for heroes. I mean, I appreciate it, but I don't want charity. It's not charity if you earned it by taking a bullet, Maria said gently. Pride is good, mijo, but don't let it make you stupid. Before Eli could respond, there was a soft knock on the door. A different nurse poked her head in. Mr. Turner, there's someone here who'd really like to see you. She's been waiting all day. Are you up for a visitor? Eli's pulse quickened. He looked at his mother, who gave him an encouraging nod. Yeah, he said, Okay. The nurse disappeared. A moment later, the door opened again, and Vivian Cross walked in. She looked different than she had in the rain. Cleaner, obviously, but also more vulnerable somehow. She wore dark jeans and a simple white blouse, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. Her eyes were red-rimmed like she'd been crying or not sleeping or both. In her hands, she carried a stuffed animal, a lion with a golden mane. She stopped just inside the door as if afraid to come closer. "Hi," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me." "Why wouldn't I?" Eli asked. "Because you got shot because of me." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because you almost died because I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And you were kind enough or brave enough or crazy enough to do something about it." Eli didn't know what to say to that. His mother stood up, squeezed his hand once, and moved toward the door. "I'll give you two some privacy. I'm going to check on Lila. Mrs. Turner," Vivian said quickly. "Thank you for raising such a good man." Maria paused, studied Vivian for a long moment, then nodded. "Take care of him while I'm gone. He's terrible at taking care of himself." Then she was gone, and it was just the two of them. Vivian moved closer to the bed, still clutching the stuffed lion. I brought this for your daughter. The nurses told me you have a little girl. I wasn't sure what 7-year-olds like, but the woman at the toy store said lions were popular, so she set it on the table beside Lila's card. Is she okay? Is she scared? She doesn't know the whole story, Eli said. Just that I got hurt. But she'll be fine. Kids are resilient. Still, I can't imagine how frightening this must be for her. For all of you. Vivian pulled up the chair his mother had vacated and sat down, perching on the edge like she might need to run at any moment. How are you? Does it hurt? Not too bad. They've got me on good drugs. She didn't smile. Eli, I don't know how to thank you. I've been trying to figure it out for 3 days and I keep coming up empty. What you did... Her voice broke. She took a breath, steadied herself. What you did was the bravest thing I've ever seen. You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything, and you still... She couldn't finish. Hey, Eli said gently. It's okay. I'd do it again. That's what terrifies me, Vivian said. And now she was crying, tears rolling down her cheeks. You would. You'd risk your life for a stranger without thinking twice. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how many people ran away? I counted them afterward. 17 people on that street, and 16 of them fled. But you? You ran toward the danger. Why? Eli thought about his father running into the burning warehouse, about the soldiers he'd served with in Afghanistan who'd thrown themselves on grenades to save their units, about the construction workers he knew who'd grabbed falling co-workers, who'd shouted warnings that cost them precious seconds, who'd chosen others over themselves without hesitation. Because someone had to, he said simply. And I was there. Vivian stared at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. I've spent my whole life around powerful people, she said. CEOs, politicians, investors, people who measure everything by cost-benefit analysis. And in 3 seconds, you did something none of them would ever do. You gave up everything you might lose for someone you might save. She wiped her eyes. I owe you my life, Eli Turner, and I never forget my debts. You don't owe me anything, Eli said. But even as he said it, he knew she wouldn't listen. He could see it in her eyes, the determination, the iron will that had probably built her empire. She'd made a decision, and nothing would change her mind. Actually, Vivian said, I owe you everything, and I'm going to prove it. Before Eli could ask what she meant, she stood up. You need to rest. I'll let you sleep, but I'll be back tomorrow if that's okay. You don't have to. I want to, she interrupted. Please, let me just be here. It's the least I can do. Eli nodded, too tired to argue. She moved toward the door, then paused and looked back. That moment in the street, she said softly, when I thought I was going to die, and then suddenly you were there, and you were bleeding, and I realized what you'd done. I keep replaying it in my head. Your face, and the way you looked at me and said, stay safe, like my life mattered more than yours. She swallowed hard. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve that. Then she was gone, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and the weight of a debt Eli had never asked for. He lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling, his shoulder aching and his mind racing. Through the window, Chicago glowed in the gathering dusk. A million lights, a million stories, a million moments that would never make the news. Somewhere out there, Lila was probably eating dinner and asking when Daddy was coming home. Somewhere, the man who'd pulled the trigger was still free, still dangerous, still a shadow waiting to hurt someone else. And somewhere between those two truths, Eli's life had just changed in ways he couldn't begin to understand. He closed his eyes and drifted toward sleep, the pain medication pulling him down into darkness. His last thought before dreams claimed him was of a woman in a red dress, standing in the rain, tears mixing with water, and a promise in her eyes that felt like both a gift and a warning. "I owe you everything." God help him, he believed her. The hospital discharged Eli 4 days later with a sling, a bottle of painkillers, and instructions to take it easy for at least 6 weeks. 6 weeks. He tried to argue with the doctor, a tired-looking woman in her 50s who'd probably heard every excuse in the book, but she'd shut him down with a look that reminded him of his mother. "Mr. Turner, you were shot. The bullet damaged muscle tissue, nicked a nerve, and came within 2 inches of your subclavian artery. You're lucky to be alive, and you're lucky to have full function of your arm. But if you go back to hauling steel and cement before you're healed, you'll tear something that won't heal right, and then you'll be looking at permanent disability. So unless you want to explain to your daughter why Daddy can't pick her up anymore, you'll follow my orders." That had ended the argument. Eli would do a lot of things, risk a lot of things, but gambling with his ability to take care of Lila wasn't one of them. His mother drove him home in her ancient Honda, the one that smelled like vanilla air freshener and had a rosary hanging from the rearview mirror. Lila sat in the back seat, unusually quiet, her small hand clutching the stuffed lion Vivian had brought. She'd been subdued since picking him up, her usual chatter replaced by worried glances and questions she seemed afraid to ask. "Does it hurt, Daddy?" she finally said as they merged onto the expressway. "Not too much, baby girl. The doctors gave me good medicine." "Mrs. Rodriguez at school said you're a hero. She showed us the news on her phone. You saved a princess." Eli caught his mother's amused glance. "She's not a princess, Lila. Just a woman who needed help. She looks like a princess. She wears pretty dresses, and she's rich, and she talks fancy." Lila hugged the lion tighter. "Are you going to be okay? You're not going to go away like Grandpa did?" Eli's chest tightened. His father's death had happened before Lila was born, but she knew the story, knew that Grandpa had been a hero too, and that heroes sometimes didn't come home. "No, sweetheart, I promise. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be here for a long, long time." "Okay," Lila said, but she didn't sound convinced. They drove through neighborhoods Eli had known his whole life, past the Palateria where he'd bought ice cream as a kid, past the church where he'd been baptized, past the park where he'd taught Lila to ride a bike last summer. This was his world, small and familiar and comfortable. The idea that he'd somehow become entangled with someone like Vivian Cross, someone who lived in a completely different universe of boardrooms and private jets and decisions that moved millions of dollars, still felt surreal. His apartment was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up in Pilsen, a neighborhood that had been Mexican for generations and was now slowly, painfully gentrifying. Every year rents went up. Every year more families he'd known his whole life moved out, replaced by young professionals attracted by the murals and the tacos and the authentic urban experience. Eli had grown up in this building. His mother still lived 2 floors down. He'd planned to stay forever, to raise Lila here, to be part of the community that had raised him. But he could feel it changing, could see the writing on the wall. Climbing 3 flights of stairs with a bullet wound turned out to be an exercise in controlled agony. His mother went ahead to unlock his door while Lila stayed close, ready to catch him if he fell. By the time he reached his apartment, sweat was running down his face and his shoulder was screaming. "Sit," his mother ordered, pointing at the couch. "I'll make coffee." Eli collapsed onto the worn cushions, the same couch he'd bought secondhand 6 years ago, when Lila was a baby, and he was scrambling to turn his life into something stable. The apartment was small. Living room, kitchenette, 1 bedroom that Lila used, and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. Eli slept on the couch. He'd been meaning to find a bigger place, but bigger places cost more, and every dollar went to Lila's needs first: clothes, school supplies, the activities that kept her engaged and happy. Lila climbed up next to him, careful not to jostle his injured side. "Can I watch TV?" "Sure, baby." She grabbed the remote and turned on her favorite show, something animated involving magical creatures and life lessons. Eli closed his eyes and listened to his mother moving around the kitchen, the familiar sounds of home. For a moment, he could almost pretend nothing had changed, almost pretend he was just recovering from a work injury, that the woman in the red dress was just a stranger he'd helped and would never see again, that his life would return to exactly what it had been. Then his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number, almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Hello? Eli, it's Vivian Cross. I hope I'm not bothering you. I got your number from the hospital, which I realize might be a violation of about 17 privacy laws, but I promised the charge nurse a donation to the children's wing, so—" She stopped, laughed nervously. "Sorry, I'm babbling. Are you home? How are you feeling?" "I'm okay. Just got back to my apartment." "Good. That's good. Listen, I know you're recovering and you probably want to be left alone, but I need to see you. There's something I want to discuss. Would tomorrow work? I can come to you. I don't want you traveling if you're not up for it." Eli glanced at his mother, who was watching him with raised eyebrows. "What's this about?" "A job offer," Vivian said. "A real one, not charity. I meant what I said at the hospital, Eli. I owe you, and I'd like the chance to prove it." Everything in Eli wanted to say no, wanted to politely decline, to keep his life separate from hers, to avoid the complications that would inevitably come from mixing their worlds. But he thought about the bills on his counter, about the 6 weeks without work, about the fact that construction companies had short memories, and if he was gone too long, they'd replace him with someone younger and healthier who didn't take bullets for strangers. "Okay," he heard himself say. "Tomorrow's fine." "Perfect. I'll come by around 10, if that works?" "And Eli, thank you for giving me the chance." She hung up before he could respond. Eli set down the phone and found both his mother and Lila staring at him. "Was that the princess?" Lila asked. "She's not a—" Yes, it was." His mother brought him coffee, pressed the mug into his good hand. "What does she want?" "To offer me a job, apparently. Are you going to take it?" "I don't even know what it is yet." "But you're considering it." It wasn't a question. Eli sipped the coffee. Too hot, too strong, exactly how he liked it. "I'm 6 weeks out of work, Mom. I've got maybe $3,000 in savings. Rent is due in 2 weeks. Leila needs new shoes because she's growing like a weed. Yeah, I'm considering it." His mother nodded slowly. "Your father always said pride was a luxury working people couldn't afford. Just be careful, mijo. That woman lives in a different world. Her help might come with strings you don't see until you're tangled up in them." "I know. But did he?" Looking at his phone, at the unknown number that belonged to a billionaire, Eli wasn't sure he knew anything anymore. The rules of his life, work hard, keep your head down, take care of your own, suddenly seemed inadequate for whatever was about to happen. That night, after his mother went home and Lila fell asleep clutching her lion, Eli sat on the couch in the dark and tried to imagine what tomorrow would bring. He pulled out his laptop, another secondhand purchase, slow but functional, and did what he should have done days ago. He researched Vivian Cross. The internet had a lot to say about her. Born Vivian Marie Laurent in a small town in Wisconsin to a single mother who cleaned houses. Scholarships to Northwestern, graduated top of her class with degrees in business and architecture. Started as a junior analyst at a real estate firm, worked her way up, then broke away at 28 to start Cross Enterprises with money borrowed from every source she could find. 10 years later, she'd built it into an empire. Luxury condos, affordable housing developments, commercial properties, even a few hotels. Forbes estimated her net worth at $2.3 billion. Chicago Magazine had named her one of the city's most influential people 3 years running. But it was the personal details that caught Eli's attention. Never married, no children. Known for being ruthlessly demanding with employees, but also for paying above market rate and offering generous benefits. Major donor to homeless shelters, after-school programs, and housing advocacy groups. She'd grown up poor and hadn't forgotten it. That's what the article said anyway. There were photos. Vivian at charity galas in stunning gowns. Vivian at construction sites wearing hard hats and designer jeans. Vivian testifying before city council about housing policy. In every picture, she looked composed, confident, powerful. But Eli kept thinking about the woman who'd knelt beside him in the rain, crying, pressing her hands against his wound. That was who she'd been when the masks came off. That was who she'd been when death was 3 seconds away. He closed the laptop. Tomorrow would bring answers or more questions, or both. For now, all he could do was try to sleep and hope his shoulder would let him. Somewhere across the city, in a penthouse apartment he'd never seen, Vivian Cross was probably doing the same thing. Probably lying awake, replaying the shooting in her mind, feeling the weight of a debt she'd never asked for but couldn't ignore. Two people from different worlds, connected by violence and chance and 3 seconds that had changed everything. The city hummed outside his window. Sirens wailed. Someone shouted in Spanish. Music drifted up from the street. Eli closed his eyes and let Chicago's night song carry him towards sleep, wondering what morning would bring and whether he was ready for it. He wasn't. But then again, he'd never been ready for any of the big moments in his life. His father's death, joining the army, getting injured in Kandahar, becoming a father. Sometimes life just happened, and all you could do was hold on and try not to get thrown off. Tomorrow, he'd hold on. Tomorrow, he'd listen to what Vivian had to say. Tomorrow, he'd make whatever choice seemed right, even if he couldn't see all the consequences yet. But tonight, he was just a man with a bullet wound and a sleeping daughter, and a future that suddenly felt a lot less certain than it had a week ago. And that, somehow, felt both terrifying and necessary. The next morning arrived with typical Chicago weather, overcast and threatening rain that never quite fell. Eli woke up stiff and sore, his shoulder a constant throb that the painkillers only dulled. He got Lila ready for school, made her oatmeal with brown sugar the way she liked it, and walked her down to meet the school bus despite his mother's protest that she could do it. "I'm not an invalid," he told her. "I can walk my kid to the bus." Lila held his good hand the whole way, chattering about her friend Sophia's birthday party that weekend, about the art project they were doing in class, about whether the stuffed lion needed a name. By the time the bus pulled up, Eli's shoulder was killing him, but watching her climb aboard and wave from the window made every step worth it. His mother had come down to monitor him. "You're pale. Go back upstairs and sit down before you pass out on the sidewalk." "Yes, ma'am." Back in the apartment, he showered carefully, trying not to get the bandages wet, then spent 20 minutes figuring out how to put on a clean shirt with one functional arm. The result wasn't pretty. The shirt was wrinkled and he couldn't button the cuff on his left side, but it would have to do. He was contemplating coffee when someone knocked on his door. 9:47. She was early. Eli opened the door and found Vivian standing in the hallway looking almost nervous. She wore dark slacks and a cream-colored blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders, minimal jewelry. Casual, by her standards. Professional, by anyone else's. She carried a leather briefcase and a white paper bag that smelled like heaven. "I brought breakfast," she said. "I wasn't sure if you'd eaten, and I figured showing up empty-handed would be rude. There's a bakery near my office that makes these croissants that are basically proof that God exists, so..." She stopped. "I'm babbling again. Sorry. I'm nervous." "You're nervous?" Eli stepped back to let her in. "You're the billionaire. I'm the guy in the crappy apartment." "It's not crappy. It's lived in. There's a difference." Vivian stepped inside, looking around with genuine interest. Her eyes landed on Lila's drawings taped to the refrigerator, the stack of library books on the coffee table, the photo of Eli and his daughter at the zoo last summer. "This is nice. It feels like a home." That's a kind way of saying small. Small doesn't mean bad. She set the briefcase and bakery bag on the kitchen counter. "My first apartment was a studio in Evanston the size of a walk-in closet. I could literally make coffee from my bed. But it was mine, and I loved it." Eli gestured to the couch. "Have a seat. You want coffee? It's not fancy, but it's strong. Please." He poured 2 mugs, brought them over along with the bakery bag. Vivian was right about the croissants. They were incredible, flaky and buttery and still warm. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment, the awkwardness of the situation fading slightly. "How's your shoulder?" Vivian asked. "Sore, but healing. Doctor says 6 weeks before I can go back to construction. And financially, I know you're not working. If you need—" "I'm okay for now," Eli interrupted gently. "But I won't pretend another month of no income won't be a problem, so whatever job you came here to offer, I'm listening." Vivian set down her croissant and wiped her hands on a napkin. "Right. Business. I can do business." She pulled a folder from her briefcase and handed it to him. "Have you heard of the Lincoln Park Affordable Housing Initiative?" Eli opened the folder. Inside were architectural renderings of a housing development, modern, clean-lined buildings with plenty of windows and green space. "Can't say I have. It's my newest project. 3 buildings, 200 units total, specifically designed for working families who've been priced out of decent housing. Teachers, nurses, construction workers, service industry, people who keep the city running but can't afford to live in the neighborhoods they serve. Rent will be capped at 30% of household income. We break ground in 3 months." Sounds ambitious. It's necessary. Chicago's losing its heart because people like you can't afford to stay. I want to help change that. Vivian leaned forward, her eyes intense. "But here's the thing. I can build beautiful buildings and offer affordable rent, but if the residents don't feel safe, it doesn't matter. Safety isn't just locks and cameras. It's culture. It's having someone who understands the community, who residents trust, who can anticipate problems before they become crises." Eli was beginning to see where this was going. "And you think that someone is me?" "I know it is. You spent 6 years in the Army. You've lived in this neighborhood your whole life. You're a parent, so you understand what families need, and you're someone who runs toward danger instead of away from it." She tapped the folder. "I want you to be the Director of Safety and Community Relations for the Lincoln Park Initiative. You'd oversee security, yes, but also work with residents to build programs, handle conflicts, coordinate with local police and schools. Make the place feel like a real community, not just cheap apartments." Eli stared at her. "Vivian, I'm a construction worker. I don't have experience with—" "You have exactly the right experience. You know how to lead people. You did it in the military. You know construction, so you'll understand the buildings. You know this city and what working families need. And most importantly, you care about people. That's not something I can teach." She pulled out another document. "Salary is $90,000 a year, full health benefits, dental, vision, 4 weeks paid vacation, college fund for Lila, and if you need to relocate closer to the site, we'll cover moving expenses." 90,000. Eli's brain stuttered. He made $38,000 a year doing construction, and that was in a good year. This was more than twice that. Life-changing money, the kind of money that meant stability, that meant not choosing between fixing the car and buying Lila new clothes. That meant maybe someday having a bedroom that wasn't the living room couch. "That's too much," he said automatically. "For that kind of money, you could get someone with actual experience, someone with degrees. I don't want someone with degrees. I want someone with judgment and character." Vivian's voice was firm. "Eli, I've spent the last week researching you. I know you served 2 tours in Afghanistan. I know you earned a Bronze Star for pulling 3 soldiers out of a burning vehicle. I know you came home injured, got your GED while recovering, took custody of your infant daughter when her mother left, and have been raising her alone ever since while working 60-hour weeks. You're exactly who I need." "You investigated me?" Eli wasn't sure if he should be flattered or disturbed. "Due diligence. I don't make offers without understanding who I'm working with, and everything I found told me you're the right person for this." She softened. "Look, I know this feels like charity, like I'm overpaying out of guilt, but I promise you, this is business. I need someone I can trust to build this community the right way, and trust is the one thing money can't buy. You already proved I can trust you. You took a bullet for me. That's a pretty good reference." Eli looked at the salary figure again, at the benefits package, at the architectural renderings of buildings that would house families like his, people who worked hard and played by the rules and just needed a break. He thought about Lila, about giving her a better life, about not having to choose between her needs and his. But he also thought about his mother's warning. Her help might come with strings you don't see. What's the catch? He asked. There's always a catch. Vivian was quiet for a moment. The catch is that it's hard work. The catch is that you'll be responsible for 200 families and all their problems. The catch is that some people will resent you for getting the job because of how we met, and you'll have to prove yourself every day. The catch is that you'll be working for me, and I'm demanding and particular, and I don't tolerate mediocrity. She met his eyes. But there's no hidden agenda, Eli. I'm not trying to control you or own you. I'm offering you a job you're qualified for because I believe you'll do it well. If you say yes and then decide it's not for you, you can quit. If it doesn't work out, we'll part ways professionally. No strings, just an opportunity. And what about us? Eli asked. What we went through together. Does that complicate things? Probably, Vivian admitted. But we're adults. We can be professional. And honestly, the fact that we share that experience might make you better at the job. You understand what trauma feels like. You understand what it means to protect people. That's valuable. Eli stood up and walked to the window. From here, he could see the neighborhood he'd grown up in, the bodega on the corner where he bought groceries, the park where kids played soccer, the mural of Cesar Chavez painted on the side of the community center. This was his world. But Vivian was offering him a bridge to something bigger, something that could change Lila's future. Can I think about it? He asked. Of course. Take all the time you need. Though I should mention, if you say yes, you'd start part-time immediately, just planning and consulting until you're healed enough for full-time work, so you'd have income right away. She was making it very hard to say no. Eli turned back to face her. Why does this matter so much to you? You could hire anyone. Why push so hard for me specifically? Vivian stood up and walked over to join him at the window. For a moment, they stood side by side, looking out at the city. Because 3 years ago, I was you, she said quietly. Not literally, but I was someone with potential and no opportunities. I was working 80 hours a week and barely surviving, trying to build something from nothing, and nobody would give me a chance. Then someone did. A man named Richard Chen, who ran a real estate fund. He took a risk on me when every bank had said no. He mentored me, taught me, gave me the capital I needed to start my company. And when I asked him why, you know what he said? What? He said, because someone did it for me once, and this is how I pay it forward. Vivian's voice was thick with emotion. Richard died 2 years ago, heart attack at his desk. He never got to see how big Cross Enterprises became, how many families we've housed, how much good we've done. But I think about him every day. I think about how different my life would be if he hadn't taken that chance. She looked at Eli. You saved my life. I can't repay that, but I can pay it forward. I can give you the same chance Richard gave me. And maybe someday you'll do the same for someone else. And that's how we change the world, one chance at a time. Eli felt something shift in his chest. He'd been thinking about this all wrong. It wasn't about charity or debt or guilt. It was about opportunity and trust in the way people lifted each other up. It was about the fact that nobody made it alone, that everyone needed help sometimes, and the measure of a person was whether they extended that help when they could. When do you need an answer? He asked. End of the week? Okay, I'll let you know by Friday. Vivian smiled, a real smile, warm and relieved. Thank you for considering it, really. She picked up her briefcase and moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. There's a press conference tomorrow night. I'm doing a public thank you, announcing a reward for information leading to the shooter's arrest. I'd like you to be there. Not to speak if you don't want to. Just to be seen. Let people know you're okay. Would you be willing? Eli's instinct was to refuse. But he thought about the families who might someday live in those buildings in the folder, about the message it would send if the man tasked with keeping them safe was too scared to face cameras. Yeah, I'll be there. Perfect. I'll send a car for you at 6. She opened the door, then turned back one more time. And Eli, whatever you decide about the job, I'm grateful. For everything. Then she was gone, leaving Eli alone with a folder full of possibilities and a decision that felt heavier than any weight he'd ever carried. He spent the rest of the day thinking, made lunch, did some physical therapy exercises the hospital had given him, picked up Lila from the bus stop, and listened to her talk about her day. Made dinner, spaghetti with sauce from a jar. Nothing fancy, but Lila loved it. Gave her a bath and read her 2 chapters of the book they were working through. Tucked her in with her lion. "Daddy?" she asked as he was about to turn off the light. "Are you going to take the job the princess offered you?" "How do you know about that?" "I heard you and Grandma talking this morning." "Are you?" Eli sat down on the edge of her bed. "I don't know yet, baby girl. It would be a big change. Different work, different schedule, but it might be good for us. What do you think?" Lila was quiet for a moment, thinking with the seriousness that always surprised him. "Would you be happy?" "Maybe. I think so." "Then you should do it. Mrs. Rodriguez says we should do things that make us happy and help people. The princess wants to help people with houses, right?" "Right. And you're good at helping people. You helped her, so maybe you should help more people." Lila yawned. "Plus she's really nice and she brought me a lion, so I like her." Eli laughed and kissed her forehead. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm 7. 7 is very wise." "Yes, it is. Sleep tight, Lila Bean." "Love you, Daddy." "Love you too." He left the door cracked open, the way she liked it, and went back to the living room. His laptop was still on the coffee table. On impulse, he Googled the Lincoln Park Affordable Housing Initiative, found articles about it, found critics who said it would never work, found supporters who called it revolutionary. Found interviews with Vivian where she talked about her vision, creating communities, not just buildings, giving people dignity, not just cheap rent. And he thought about Richard Chen, the man who'd taken a chance on a young woman with nothing but ambition and intelligence. Thought about how that one decision had rippled outward, changing not just Vivian's life, but the lives of thousands of people who'd never even heard his name. Maybe that was the point. Maybe the world changed not through grand gestures, but through small ones, repeated over and over. One person helping another, one chance given, one door opened. Maybe his father running into that burning building hadn't just saved 3 people. Maybe it had taught his son something about who he wanted to be, and maybe Eli running toward danger instead of away from it had shown Vivian something about human nature that she'd needed to see. Maybe it was all connected. Maybe that's how it worked. Around midnight, Eli made his decision. He'd sleep on it one more night, make sure it still felt right in the morning. But deep down, he already knew. He'd take the job, not because he owed Vivian anything, and not because he needed the money, though God knew he did. He'd take it because it was the right thing to do, because it was an opportunity to help people, because it was a chance to build something that mattered, and because his daughter was 7 years old and already understood something profound. You should do things that make you happy and help people. Sometimes wisdom came from unexpected places. Outside, Chicago hummed its endless song. Somewhere in a penthouse apartment, Vivian Cross was probably still awake, wondering if she'd said the right things, if she'd convinced him, if the man who'd saved her life would give her the chance to change his. Somewhere, families worried about rent and jobs and futures that felt uncertain. Somewhere, a gunman still walked free, carrying the weight of violence he'd tried to commit. But here, in this small apartment in Pilsen, Eli Turner closed his eyes and felt, for the first time in a long time, like the future held something more than just survival. It held possibility. It held purpose. It held the chance to be part of something bigger than himself. Tomorrow he'd go to the press conference. Friday he'd accept the job. And after that, he'd figure out how to navigate a new world while staying true to who he was. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever was. But his father had taught him that. The army had reinforced it, and Lila reminded him of it every single day. You did the hard thing because it was right. You helped people because that's what good people did. You took the chances that scared you because growth lived on the other side of fear. And if a woman in a red dress wanted to give him a chance to prove that, well, maybe that was exactly what both of them needed. The black SUV arrived at exactly 6 o'clock the next evening, so sleek and out of place on his street that neighbors were peering through curtains before Eli even made it downstairs. His mother had come by earlier to watch Lila, fussing over his clothes, a button-down shirt his sister had bought him last Christmas, and the only pair of dress pants he owned, and giving him advice he hadn't asked for about talking to reporters. Don't say anything stupid. Don't let them twist your words. And for God's sake, smile. You always look so serious in photos. I got shot, Mom. I think serious is appropriate. You're a hero. Heroes smile. It makes people feel better. Now sliding into the SUV's leather interior, Eli wondered if he'd made a mistake agreeing to this. The driver was professional and silent, the kind of person who'd perfected the art of being invisible. The vehicle smelled like expensive cologne and possibility. Through the tinted windows, Chicago slid past, his neighborhood giving way to downtown, familiar streets becoming glass towers and corporate monuments. His phone buzzed, a text from Vivian. "Thank you for doing this. I know it's not your comfort zone. You'll be great." He typed back, "Hope you're right." 3 dots appeared, then, "I'm always right. It's annoying but useful." Despite his nerves, Eli smiled. There was something disarming about Vivian's directness, the way she could be both intimidating and approachable. He'd expected someone in her position to be all sharp edges and calculated moves, but she had depth, vulnerability mixed with steel, humor alongside the intensity. It made her real in a way that billionaires weren't supposed to be real. The press conference was being held at Cross Enterprises headquarters, a 40-story tower on Walker Drive with Vivian's name etched in silver letters above the entrance. The driver pulled into an underground garage, navigating past concrete pillars and reserved spots until they reached a private elevator. A woman in a crisp suit was waiting. "Mr. Turner, I'm Alicia Chen, Ms. Cross's chief of staff. I'll be coordinating things tonight. How are you feeling?" "Nervous," Eli admitted. "That's normal. The good news is you don't have to speak unless you want to. We've prepared a statement from Ms. Cross thanking you publicly and announcing the reward. There will be questions from reporters, but we'll screen them, and you can decline to answer anything that makes you uncomfortable." Alicia pressed the elevator button. "The key is to just be yourself. That's who people want to see, the real person, not a polished version. Does that make sense?" "I think so." "Good. And Mr. Turner, what you did was extraordinary. People need to see that extraordinary people exist. That's what tonight is really about." The elevator rose silently, stopping at the top floor. The doors opened onto a reception area that looked like something from a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the Chicago River, modern art on the walls, furniture that probably cost more than Eli's truck. Alicia led him down a hallway to a large conference room where the press conference would be held. Rows of chairs faced a podium. Cameras were being set up. Reporters milled around checking equipment and comparing notes. Vivian stood near the windows, talking to an older man in a suit. She wore a navy dress, simple but elegant, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look both professional and approachable. When she saw Eli, her face brightened and she excused herself. "You came," she said, and there was genuine relief in her voice. "Said I would." "I know, but I was half convinced you'd change your mind. How are you? Is your shoulder okay?" "It's fine. Stop worrying about me." "I can't help it. It's become a habit." Vivian glanced at the assembling reporters. "This is going to be a circus. Every major outlet in Chicago sent someone, plus a few nationals. The story has legs. Stranger saves billionaire, takes bullet, mystery hero revealed. It's got all the elements people love." "Great," Eli said dryly. Vivian laughed. "You'll be fine. Just stand next to me, look heroic, and try not to flinch when the cameras flash. Oh, and one more thing. I need to ask you something before we start." She seemed to brace herself. "Have you made a decision about the job?" Eli had planned to wait until Friday to take the full time she'd given him. But looking at her now, at the hope and nervousness in her eyes, at the woman who'd built an empire from nothing and was trying to pay forward a kindness someone had shown her years ago, he realized there was no point in waiting. "Yes," he said, "I'll take it." For a moment, Vivian just stared at him. Then her face broke into a smile so genuine and unguarded that it transformed her completely. "Really? You're sure?" "I'm sure. I talked to my daughter about it last night. She said I should do things that make me happy and help people. Figured that was pretty good advice from a 7-year-old. She sounds wise beyond her years." "She is. Gets it from her grandmother." Vivian laughed again, then seemed to catch herself. "We should celebrate. After this circus is over, let me take you to dinner. Nothing fancy, just... Actually, I don't know any places that aren't fancy. You'll have to teach me where normal people eat. Normal people eat at the taco place on 18th Street. Perfect. Best tacos in Chicago, I'm told. It's a date. I mean, not a date. A business dinner. A celebratory business dinner. She was flustered now, color rising in her cheeks. God, listen to me. You'd think I'd never had a conversation before. It's fine, Eli said, finding her nervousness oddly comforting. I know what you meant. Alicia appeared at Vivian's elbow. We're ready to start in 5 minutes. Ms. Cross, I need you to review these talking points one more time. Mr. Turner, you'll stand here. She indicated a spot to the left of the podium. And just follow Ms. Cross's lead. Ready? Eli's heart was pounding, but he nodded. Ready as I'll ever be. The room filled quickly. Reporters took their seats, cameras focused on the podium. The ambient chatter rose to a dull roar. Eli stood in his designated spot, acutely aware of every eye in the room. Every camera lens pointed in his direction. His shoulder throbbed. Stress always made it worse. But he kept his face neutral. His mother's voice echoed in his head. Smile, you always look so serious. He tried. It probably looked more like a grimace. Vivian stepped to the podium with the kind of confidence that came from years of public speaking. The room quieted immediately. Good evening. Thank you all for coming. I'll keep my opening statement brief, then take a few questions. As many of you know, 1 week ago, I was the intended victim of an armed robbery downtown. A man pointed a gun at me, and I truly believed, that my life was over. Her voice was steady but carried emotion. Then Eli Turner, a man I had never met, a construction worker who was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, did something I still can't fully comprehend. He ran toward danger. He put himself between me and that gun. He took a bullet meant for me. She paused, letting that sink in. Eli didn't know who I was. He didn't know if I was rich or poor, important or ordinary. He just knew I was in danger, and he acted. No hesitation, no calculation, just pure instinct to protect another human being. That kind of courage is rare. That kind of selflessness is what makes someone a hero. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. Eli felt heat crawling up his neck. This was too much attention, too much praise. He'd just done what anyone should do. Hadn't he? I owe Eli my life, Vivian continued. I can never repay that debt, but I can honor it. Tonight, I'm announcing a $50,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the shooter. No one should be able to commit this kind of violence and walk free. Additionally, Cross Enterprises is donating $500,000 to programs that support first responders and crime victims in Eli's name. The reporters erupted with questions, shouting over each other. Alicia stepped forward to moderate. One at a time, please. Sarah, go ahead. A woman in the front row stood. Ms. Cross, what was going through your mind when you realized what Mr. Turner had done? Terror, Vivian said without hesitation. Pure terror. Not for myself anymore, but for him. I watched him fall. I saw the blood. And I thought I just witnessed someone die because of me. That's not something you forget. That's not something you move past. It changes you. Another reporter. Mr. Turner, can you tell us what made you intervene? All eyes turned to Eli. He hadn't planned to speak, but now it seemed impossible not to. He stepped closer to the microphone, his mouth dry. I saw someone in danger, didn't think about it, just acted. Were you scared? Didn't have time to be scared. It happened too fast. Do you consider yourself a hero? Eli shook his head. No, I'm just someone who did what needed to be done. Real heroes are the people who do this every day. Cops, firefighters, paramedics. They run toward danger for a living. I just did it once. Once was enough, Vivian said softly, and the reporters caught it, jotting down the quote. More questions flew. How was his recovery? What would he do with the publicity? Had he spoken to police? Did he remember details about the shooter? Eli answered what he could, deflected what he couldn't. Vivian fielded questions about security, about whether she feared retaliation, about how this experience had affected her personally. It's given me perspective, she said. I've spent my career building things, buildings, companies, wealth. But Eli reminded me what really matters. People helping people, strangers caring about strangers, the basic human decency we sometimes forget exists. That's what I want to build going forward, not just structures, but communities, not just profit, but purpose. She glanced at Eli, and something passed between them, an understanding, an acknowledgement of how intertwined their lives had become in just 1 week. The reporters saw it too. Eli could practically hear the headlines writing themselves. Billionaire and hero, an unlikely bond, when worlds collide. After 30 minutes, Alicia called time. That's all for tonight. Thank you for coming. Press packets with additional information are available at the door. The crowd dispersed slowly, reporters lingering to grab last-minute quotes, cameras capturing final shots. Eli felt exhausted, wrung out, like he'd just run a marathon. Vivian touched his elbow gently. You did great. Better than great. You were honest and humble and exactly what people needed to see. She looked almost as tired as he felt. Still up for those tacos? Eli's instinct was to say no, to go home and collapse on his couch and pretend this whole evening hadn't happened. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the vulnerability in Vivian's voice, the sense that she needed this as much as he did, a moment of normalcy after a week of chaos. Maybe it was his own curiosity about this woman who'd crashed into his life so dramatically. Or maybe it was just that he was hungry and tacos sounded perfect. Yeah, he said, let us get tacos. They took her car, a BMW that probably cost more than most people made in 2 years but felt surprisingly normal inside, with coffee cups in the holder and a phone charger tangled in the center console. She drove herself, waving off the offer of a driver, navigating the streets with the ease of someone who knew the city intimately. Where are we going? She asked. Pilsen. I'll direct you. Your neighborhood. Perfect. I want to see where you live, where Lila goes to school. If I'm going to work with you, I should understand your world. They drove south, leaving the glass towers behind for streets that felt lived in, authentic, marked by generations of immigration and struggle and survival. Murals bloomed on brick walls. Small businesses crowded next to each other, panaderias, carnicerias, botanicas. Music drifted from open windows. People sat on stoops despite the evening chill, talking and laughing and living their lives in full view. This is beautiful, Vivian said, and she sounded like she meant it. I grew up in a neighborhood like this. Different city, same feeling. Working class, tight-knit, everyone watching out for each other. It's changing, though. Every year, more families get priced out. More young professionals move in looking for authenticity they can Instagram. Give it 10 years, it'll be completely different. That's why projects like Lincoln Park matter, Vivian said quietly. We can't stop gentrification everywhere, but we can create spaces where working families aren't squeezed out, where teachers and construction workers and nurses can afford to live in the communities they serve. Eli directed her to the taco place, a small storefront with plastic tables and a hand-painted sign that had been there for 30 years. They parked and went inside. The owner, a woman named Rosa, who'd known Eli since he was a kid, nearly dropped her spatula when she saw him. Mijo, I saw you on the news. Hey, you're a hero. And who is this? She looked at Vivian with open curiosity. Rosa, this is Vivian. Vivian was... Rosa makes the best tacos in Chicago. The best tacos anywhere, Rosa corrected. She hugged Eli carefully, mindful of his shoulder, then turned to Vivian and did the same. Any friend of Eli's eats for free tonight. What can I get you? They ordered al pastor for Eli, carnitas for Vivian, plus rice and beans and homemade horchata. Rosa wouldn't take their money despite Vivian's protests. You saved a life, Rosa said firmly. That's worth more than tacos. They sat at a corner table, plastic chairs and formica top and paper napkins, and ate food that tasted like home. Vivian closed her eyes on the first bite of her taco and made a sound that was almost indecent. Oh my God, this is incredible. Told you. No, I mean, I've eaten at Michelin-starred restaurants. I've had private chefs. But this? She took another bite. This is better than all of them. But that's because Rosa cooks with love. You can't fake that, can't buy it. It just is. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the kind of silence that only comes when people are too busy enjoying food to bother with conversation. Around them, the restaurant hummed with life. Families with kids, workers stopping in after shifts, teenagers flirting awkwardly. Real life, unfiltered. "Can I ask you something?" Vivian said eventually. "Sure." "Why did you say yes? To the job, I mean. Was it just the money?" Eli considered the question carefully. "Money's part of it. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. But mostly, it's what you said about paying it forward, about how someone took a chance on you and now you're taking a chance on me. That matters. It feels like being part of something bigger than just surviving day to day. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." Vivian traced patterns in the condensation on her horchata glass. "Can I tell you something? I've been terrified all week. Not of the shooter, though I probably should be, but of screwing this up. Of making you an offer that insults you or comes off as charity or makes everything weird between us. I'm used to business relationships where everything is transactional, where both parties know exactly what they're getting. But this, us, it's complicated." "Yeah, it is," Eli agreed. "But maybe complicated isn't bad. Maybe it just means it matters." Vivian looked up, meeting his eyes. "You're wise. You know that? Wiser than most of the CEOs I deal with. I'm a construction worker who barely finished high school. You're a man who understands what's important. Education and wisdom aren't the same thing." She paused. "I need to be honest with you about something. The press is going to be interested in us, in our relationship, whatever it is. They're going to look for angles, create narratives. Some people will say I'm exploiting you for good PR. Others will say you're taking advantage of me for money. It's going to be uncomfortable. So what do? We ignore it. We do the work, build the community, prove them all wrong, and we trust each other. Can you do that? Trust me?" Eli thought about the moment in the rain, about her hands pressing against his wound, about the tears in her eyes. He thought about her visiting him every day in the hospital, about the job offer that could change his life, about the way she'd looked at Lila's drawing on his refrigerator like it was priceless art. "Yeah," he said, "I can trust you." "Good. Because I already trust you. You took a bullet for me." That's pretty much the definition of trustworthy. They finished their meal, and Rosa insisted on packing them extra food to take home. "For your daughter," she told Eli. "Tell Lila her Uncle Rosa says hello." Outside, the evening had turned cold, the kind of Chicago cold that cut through jackets and reminded you that winter was always closer than you thought. They stood by Vivian's car, neither quite ready to end the evening. "Thank you," Vivian said. "For tonight, for the job, for everything. I know I keep saying that, but I don't know what else to say. You don't have to keep thanking me. We're even. You gave me an opportunity. I'm taking it. Fresh start for both of us." "Fresh start," Vivian echoed. "I like that." She pulled her coat tighter against the cold. "I should let you go. You're still recovering, and I've kept you out late enough. But Eli, I'm glad you said yes. I think we're going to do good work together." "Me too." She hesitated, then leaned in and hugged him, carefully, aware of his injury, but genuine. Eli returned it with his good arm, and for just a moment they were two people who'd survived something terrible together, finding comfort in that shared experience. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. "See you Monday? We can start planning, get you oriented to the project." "Monday works." He watched her drive away, the BMW's taillights disappearing into Chicago traffic. A hero. A job offer he'd accepted, tacos with a billionaire in his neighborhood taco shop, a hug that felt like the beginning of something he couldn't quite name. His mother was watching a telenovela when he got back, Lila asleep on the couch beside her. She muted the TV when he came in. "Well, how did it go?" "It was fine, weird, but fine." He set the food in the kitchen. "I told Vivian I'd take the job." His mother studied his face. "You're sure about this?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway. That's how the best decisions always feel." She stood, stretched, kissed his cheek. "Your father would be proud of you, mijo. Not for taking the bullet, though he'd understand that, but for taking the chance, for being brave enough to change your life." After she left, Eli carried Lila to her bed, tucking her in with her lion. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. He stood there for a moment, watching her sleep, thinking about all the ways his decision would affect her life. better schools, better opportunities. A father who came home at a reasonable hour instead of exhausted and covered in construction dust. Stability, security, the chance to be more than just surviving. That's what this was really about. Not him, not Vivian, not some grand gesture of heroism or debt repayment. It was about giving his daughter a better life. And if doing that meant stepping into a world that scared him, meant trusting a woman he barely knew, meant becoming someone different than the man he'd been a week ago, well, that was a price he was willing to pay. He went to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere in one of those glass towers, Vivian was probably still awake, planning and strategizing and trying to build something that mattered. Somewhere, families worried about rent. Somewhere, the shooter still walked free. And here, in this small apartment, Eli Turner stood at the edge of a new life, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. The next few days passed in a blur. Eli officially accepted the position with Cross Enterprises, signing contracts that made his new salary real, that made him an employee of a company worth billions. Vivian sent over materials about the Lincoln Park Initiative, architectural plans, demographic studies, community feedback, security assessments. He spent hours reading through everything, trying to understand the scope of what he'd be managing. It was overwhelming. The project was massive, far bigger than anything he'd imagined. 200 units across 3 buildings, plus common areas, a community center, a playground, green spaces. The budget ran into the tens of millions. The timeline spanned 3 years from breaking ground to full occupancy. And he was supposed to be responsible for making sure it all felt safe and welcoming, that it became a real community instead of just cheap housing. He called Vivian on Thursday, his voice tight with anxiety. "I don't know if I can do this. It's too big." "It's not too big. You're just looking at it all at once instead of breaking it into pieces." Her voice was calm, grounding. "You don't have to do everything yourself, Eli. You'll have a team, security staff, community organizers, social workers. Your job is to lead them, to set the vision. And you're good at that. You were a sergeant in the Army. You know how to lead." That was different. That was life and death. This is life and death too. Just slower, quieter. Families who can't afford housing die slowly, from stress, from instability, from losing hope. You're going to help prevent that. That's just as important as taking a bullet. Her words settled something in him. She was right. He'd been thinking about this job as something new and foreign, but really, it was just an extension of what he'd always done, protecting people, helping them survive, giving them a chance at something better. "Okay," he said. "I'm in, for real this time." "You were always in. You just needed to believe it." On Friday, Eli took Lila to Sophia's birthday party, a chaotic affair in a too-small apartment with 20 kids and pizza and a piñata. Lila ran around with her friends, shrieking with laughter, her face painted like a butterfly. Sophia's mother, Carmen, pulled Eli aside. "I saw you on TV," she said. "The news, the press conference. Eli, that was incredible. You saved someone's life." "Just did what I had to do." "Don't downplay it. My kids need to see examples like you. Need to know there are still good people in the world." Carmen lowered her voice. "Is it true you're working for her now? For the woman you saved?" Word traveled fast in this neighborhood. "Yeah, starting Monday." "That's wonderful. And Eli? I'm happy for you. You deserve good things. You've been a good father to Lila, a good neighbor to all of us. It's about time life gave you a break." Later, driving home with a sugar-crashed Lila in the back seat, Eli thought about Carmen's words. He'd never considered that his life needed a break, that he deserved anything beyond what he'd worked for. He'd just been doing his best, day by day, trying to be a good father and a decent person. But maybe that was exactly why opportunities like this mattered, because people who spent their lives helping others rarely got helped in return unless someone made a conscious choice to change that pattern. That night, after Lila was asleep, Eli's phone rang. "Vivian." "Sorry to call so late. Am I interrupting?" "No, just sitting here thinking about Monday, first day of work." "Technically, you won't start full-time until you're fully healed. Monday is just orientation, meeting the team, getting familiar with the project, low pressure." "In my experience, nothing involving you is low pressure." Vivian laughed. "Fair point, but I promise to go easy on you, at least for the first week." She paused. "Eli, I want you to know something. When I offered you this job, I wasn't just trying to pay back a debt. I genuinely believe you're the right person for it. And if at any point you feel like I'm wrong, if this isn't working, we can figure out a different solution. I don't want you to feel trapped. I don't feel trapped. I don't know, like I'm standing at the edge of something big and I can't see the bottom, but in a good way, I think. That's how all the best things feel, terrifying and exciting at the same time. They talked for another 20 minutes about nothing important, about Chicago, about their favorite places in the city, about music and books and the small things that made up a life. It was easy conversation, the kind that felt natural despite the fact that they barely knew each other. When they finally hung up, Eli realized he was smiling. Sunday night, he couldn't sleep. He lay on his couch, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with all the ways this could go right or wrong. What if he failed? What if he let down the families who'd be counting on him? What if he proved all the doubters right? All the people who'd say he only got the job because of one dramatic moment and not because he was actually qualified. But then he thought about his father running into that warehouse, about his sergeant in Afghanistan who told him once, right before a mission, courage isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing it anyway. About Lila's 7-year-old wisdom, do things that make you happy and help people. He got up and went to her room, stood in the doorway watching her sleep. She'd kicked off her blankets, she always did, and was sprawled across the bed like she owned it. The lion was clutched in one arm. She looked peaceful, safe, loved. That's what this was all for. Every risk, every fear, every moment of doubt. He was building a better life for her, and if that meant stepping into something that terrified him, so be it. His father had died being brave. His mother had been brave her whole life, working hard jobs to support her family. He came from a long line of people who did hard things because they needed to be done. This was just the next hard thing. Monday morning arrived cold and bright. Eli dressed in his best clothes, still not fancy, but clean and presentable. He made Lila breakfast, walked her to the bus, came back to find his mother waiting with coffee and encouragement. "You look good, mijo. Professional." "I look like I'm playing dress-up." "You look like a man starting a new chapter. Now go. Don't be late on your first day." The Cross Enterprises building looked even more intimidating in daylight. Eli stood on the sidewalk for a moment, gathering his courage, then pushed through the revolving doors into the lobby. Marble floors, modern art, a reception desk that looked like sculpture. A security guard checked his ID against a list. "Mr. Turner, you're expected, 40th floor." The elevator ride up felt both endless and too quick. When the doors opened, Alicia Chen was waiting. "Welcome to Cross Enterprises. Ready for your first day?" "Ready as I'll ever be." "Perfect. Come with me. We'll get you set up with an office, ID badge, computer access. Then you'll meet with Ms. Cross and the Lincoln Park team. Fair warning, it's going to be a lot of information all at once." She led him through halls of glass-walled offices and conference rooms, past people working at standing desks and collaboration spaces. Everyone looked young, sharp, purposeful. Eli felt completely out of place and exactly where he needed to be, all at the same time. His office was smaller than he'd expected, but still nicer than anywhere he'd ever worked. Windows overlooking the river, a real desk, a computer that actually looked new. His name was already on the door, Eli Turner, Director of Safety and Community Relations. "Take a minute," Alicia said. "I'll be back in 5 to take you to the meeting." Alone, Eli stood at the window and looked out at Chicago spread below him. From up here, the city looked clean, orderly, manageable. But he knew the truth. Down there were people struggling, families barely holding on, kids growing up in neighborhoods where hope was scarce. He was up here now, in the realm of glass towers and big decisions. But he couldn't forget where he'd come from. That was the whole point. That's why Vivian had chosen him. A knock on the door. Vivian stood there, professional in a gray suit, but her smile was warm. "How does it feel?" "Surreal." "That's normal. It felt surreal to me for about the first 6 months." She stepped into the office, looked around with approval. "But you belong here, Eli. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you otherwise. Ready to meet the team?" He nodded. Whatever came next, he'd face it. Just like he'd faced everything else. with courage he didn't feel and hope he couldn't quite explain. Vivian started toward the door, then turned back. Hey, thank you for taking this leap. I know it's scary, but I promise you, we're going to do something amazing together. Yeah, Eli said, surprising himself with how much he believed it. I think we are. They walked down the hall side by side, the construction worker and the CEO, two people from different worlds brought together by violence and chance, and 3 seconds that had changed everything. Behind them was the past, his old life, her near death, the moment in the rain. Ahead was the future, uncertain, challenging, full of possibility. And somewhere in between was this moment, right now, taking the first step into something new. The conference room was already full when they arrived. 8 people sat around a glass table, laptops open, coffee cups scattered among folders and architectural drawings. They looked up when Vivian entered, conversations dying mid-sentence. Eli felt their eyes on him, curious, assessing, some friendly, some skeptical. Everyone, this is Eli Turner, our new Director of Safety and Community Relations. Eli, this is the core team for Lincoln Park. Vivian gestured around the table. Marcus Williams, Head of Construction, Sarah Chen, Lead Architect, David Rodriguez, Community Outreach Coordinator, Jennifer Hayes, Property Management, and 4 others you'll get to know over the coming weeks. Handshakes, names Eli tried to memorize, polite smiles that didn't quite reach some of their eyes. He'd expected this. He was the outsider, the guy who'd gotten the job because he took a bullet, not because he'd earned it through years of climbing the corporate ladder. He'd have to prove himself every single day. Eli comes to us with a unique perspective, Vivian continued, taking her seat at the head of the table. Military experience, deep community roots, and a genuine understanding of what working families need to feel safe and supported. He'll be developing our security protocols, resident programs, and community engagement strategies. I expect everyone to bring him up to speed quickly. Questions? A woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes spoke up. With all respect, Ms. Cross, this is a complex project. Mr. Turner's background is construction work, not community development or security management. How do we know he's qualified? The room went silent. Eli felt heat crawl up his neck, but Vivian didn't flinch. That's a fair question, Jennifer. Here's my answer. I'm betting on character over credentials. Eli spent 6 years in the Army leading soldiers in combat situations. He understands risk assessment, crisis management, and how to keep people safe under pressure. He's lived in working-class Chicago his whole life, raised a daughter alone while working 60-hour weeks, and maintained strong community ties. That's exactly the perspective we need. Anyone can learn policy and procedure. You can't teach someone to genuinely care about people. Vivian's tone was pleasant, but left no room for argument. Besides, he'll have support from all of you. That's what teamwork means. Any other concerns? No one spoke. Jennifer nodded slowly, making a note. Understood. Welcome aboard, Mr. Turner. The meeting progressed into details Eli struggled to follow at first. Budget allocations, construction timelines, zoning variances, community feedback from preliminary surveys. But as he listened, patterns emerged. This wasn't just about building apartments. It was about creating an ecosystem where families could thrive. Childcare options, after-school programs, school, job training partnerships, health services, transportation access. Every detail mattered because every detail affected whether people would feel this was home or just a place they lived. Marcus, the construction head, pulled up 3D renderings of the buildings. We're using sustainable materials, maximizing natural light, designing communal spaces that encourage interaction. But Ms. Cross is right that all the fancy architecture means nothing if residents don't feel safe. That's where you come in, Eli. Tell me about the neighborhood, Eli said. Crime rates, demographics, existing community structures. Sarah, the architect, pulled up demographic data. Lincoln Park is transitioning. Used to be solidly working class, now it's gentrifying rapidly. Property values up 40% in 5 years. That's pricing out long-term residents, creating tension between old and new populations. Crime isn't terrible, but it's present. Property theft mostly, some gang activity on the edges, occasional violence. What's the police relationship like? Community trust level? David, the outreach coordinator, answered that one. Mixed. Some residents trust CPD, others have had negative experiences. We'll need to build bridges there carefully. Can't rely solely on police presence. Needs to be community-based safety. Agreed, Eli said. Military taught me that security isn't just about force. It's about relationships, about people looking out for each other. We need resident leadership, neighborhood watch programs, connections with local schools and churches. Make people feel invested. Vivian caught his eye across the table and smiled. He was saying the right things, finding his footing. Maybe he could do this after all. The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the end, Eli's head was spinning with information, but he'd also earned something, if not full acceptance, at least a provisional willingness to see what he could do. People were still skeptical, but they were listening. Afterward, Vivian walked him back to his office. You did well. Jennifer's going to be your toughest critic, but that's because she's good at her job. She holds everyone to high standards. She's right, though. I don't have the traditional qualifications. Traditional qualifications create traditional solutions. I don't want traditional. I want transformative. Vivian leaned against his door frame. Listen, the next few weeks will be intense. You'll be learning on the fly, making mistakes, figuring things out. That's normal. But I hired you because I believe in you, and I don't do that lightly. Trust yourself. I'll try. Good. Now I'm stealing you for lunch. We need to talk about something important. They went to a small Thai place a few blocks away, the kind of restaurant that existed in the shadow of corporate towers, serving office workers on tight lunch breaks. Over pad thai and spring rolls, Vivian's professional demeanor softened slightly. I got a call from the police this morning, she said quietly. They have a lead on the shooter, security footage from a building across the street. They think they can identify him. Eli set down his fork. That's good news. Maybe. The detective warned me that when they make an arrest, the media attention will intensify. There'll be a trial eventually. We'll both have to testify, relive everything, and the coverage will be, She paused, searching for words. Invasive. They'll dig into our lives, our relationship, looking for angles. Our relationship, Eli repeated. We work together. That's the relationship. That's what we know, but the media will speculate. They always do. And I want you to be prepared for that, for people questioning your motives, my motives, whether this is all some publicity stunt or something more. She met his eyes. It's going to be uncomfortable. I can handle uncomfortable. I know you can. I just wanted to be honest about what's coming. Vivian pushed her food around her plate. There's something else. I've been getting letters, notes, actually, sent to my office, my home, anonymous. Eli went still. Threatening? Not explicitly, just strange. Things like, you didn't deserve to be saved, and heroes die young, and luck runs out. The police say it's probably nothing, just someone with too much time. But after getting shot, I'm not as quick to dismiss threats. Have you increased security? I have a bodyguard now, Marcus, former Secret Service. He's good, very professional, barely notice he's there. She smiled wryly. Well, that's a lie. I notice constantly. I hate feeling like I need protection, like I can't just live my life. But apparently that's my reality now. Eli thought about the shooter still out there, about anonymous notes, about the way Vivian's life had changed just as dramatically as his own. I could, if you need someone else, someone you trust. You're sweet, but you're recovering from a gunshot wound and starting a demanding new job. The last thing you need is to play bodyguard, too. Vivian reached across the table and squeezed his hand briefly. Besides, you already saved me once. That's above and beyond anyone's job description. They finished lunch and headed back to the office. Eli spent the afternoon in orientation meetings, HR paperwork, IT setup, facilities tour. By 5 o'clock, his shoulder was aching and his brain was full. He was gathering his things when Vivian appeared in his doorway again. First day survival status? Surviving, barely. Good enough. Go home. Rest. We'll ease you in gradually. Oh, and Eli, thank you for today. For jumping in, for not being intimidated by Jennifer, for being exactly what I hoped you'd be. The words settled warm in his chest. Thanks for the chance. He rode the elevator down with other employees leaving for the day. Caught fragments of their conversations about projects and deadlines and plans for the evening. Normal work stuff. Was this his life now? Office jobs and meetings and corporate culture? It felt alien and somehow right at the same time. His phone rang as he stepped onto the street. His mother. How was it? Good. Overwhelming, but good. They're skeptical but willing to give me a shot. Of course they are. You're Eli Turner. You'll prove yourself. Her voice shifted. Listen, mijo, I need to talk to you about something. Can you stop by on your way home? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Just come by. His mother's apartment was 2 floors below his, the same layout but filled with 40 years of accumulated life. Photos on every surface, religious icons, furniture worn comfortable. She had coffee ready when he arrived, along with pan dulce from the panaderia. Sit. Eat. Mom, what's this about? Maria sat across from him, her face serious. I got a visit today. From a reporter. Woman from the Tribune said she was doing a story on you. Asked questions about your childhood, your father, Lila's mother. Eli's stomach dropped. What did you tell her? Nothing. Told her to leave and not come back. But Eli, she knew things. Knew about Elena leaving when Lila was 3 months old. Knew about your medical discharge from the army. She's been digging. Elena. Eli hadn't heard that name in years, hadn't thought about his daughter's mother except when Lila asked questions he didn't know how to answer. She'd been 19 and scared when she got pregnant, 20 when Lila was born, and gone before their daughter learned to smile. Just vanished one morning, leaving a note saying she couldn't do it, couldn't be a mother, couldn't handle the responsibility. He tried to find her at first, thought maybe she'd come back. But eventually he'd accepted that Lila was his alone. Why would reporters care about Elena? Because you're news now. The hero with the complicated past makes a better story than the hero who's perfect. His mother's voice was gentle. I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you so you're prepared. These people, they'll dig up everything. Your father's death, your injury in Afghanistan, Elena abandoning her baby. They'll make it all public. Eli closed his eyes. He'd known there would be scrutiny, but he hadn't thought about this, about private pain becoming public entertainment. Does Lila need to know? About her mother, I mean. About reporters asking questions. Not yet. She's 7. But eventually, yes. Better she hears it from you than from some kid at school whose parents read the paper. Maria reached across and gripped his hand. You're strong, mijo. You've survived worse than gossip, but protect Lila. That's what matters most. He left 20 minutes later, his mind churning. The job felt even more complicated now, tangled with media attention and invasion of privacy and questions he'd spent years avoiding. He thought about calling Vivian, warning her that reporters were digging into his past. But what would he say? That his life wasn't as simple as it looked? She probably already knew that. Everyone's life was complicated if you looked close enough. At home, Lila was doing homework at the kitchen table, his sister Rosa watching her while texting someone. She looked up when he entered. There's my famous brother. How was the first day with the billionaires? Don't start. I'm proud of you, you know. Making something of yourself, taking care of Lila, being a good man despite everything. Rosa stood, gathered her things. But be careful, Eli. That world you're stepping into, it's not like here. Different rules, different dangers. After she left, he helped Lila with her math homework, made them grilled cheese for dinner, watched an episode of her favorite show. Normal evening routine, comforting in its predictability. But his mind kept drifting. To Vivian's anonymous notes, to reporters digging through his past, to the shooter still out there somewhere, to everything that had changed in 2 weeks. Lila noticed. Daddy, you're not watching. Sorry, baby girl, just thinking about work. Is it hard, your new job? Yeah, but good hard. The kind that matters. Like when I learn new math. It's hard, but then I understand and it feels good. Exactly like that. She leaned against him, her small warmth grounding. I'm glad you took the job. Grandma says we'll have more money now. Can I take dance classes? Sophia takes dance and she says it's really fun. Yeah, sweetheart, you can take dance classes. Her face lit up and she hugged him tight, and in that moment, all the complications didn't matter. This is what it was all for, her smile, her dreams, her chance at a life better than just scraping by. The weeks that followed blurred together in a steep learning curve. Eli spent mornings in meetings, afternoons studying security protocols and community development research, evenings with Lila and his family. His shoulder healed slowly, physical therapy twice a week, the range of motion returning gradually. He still couldn't lift heavy things, but he could type, could take notes, could sit through 8-hour workdays without passing out from pain. The team at Cross Enterprises warmed to him incrementally. Marcus, the construction manager, started including him in site walkthroughs, explaining structural elements and how they'd impact security needs. Sarah, the architect, asked his opinion on lighting and sightlines, actually listening when he suggested modifications. David brought him to community meetings in Lincoln Park, introducing him to residents and local leaders, helping him understand neighborhood dynamics. Only Jennifer remained skeptical, questioning his decisions and pushing back on his recommendations. But even that served a purpose. It forced Eli to think harder, to justify his choices, to become better at his job. Vivian was present but not hovering. She'd check in daily, usually just a quick conversation about progress or challenges, occasionally taking him to lunch or coffee to discuss bigger picture strategy. Their relationship stayed professional, friendly, but bounded by the work. Except sometimes Eli would catch her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, something like pride mixed with curiosity, mixed with something else, something neither of them acknowledged. The media attention continued but evolved. The initial hero story gave way to features about the Lincoln Park Initiative, profiles of Vivian as a business leader with social conscience, occasional mentions of Eli as the unlikely director bringing street smarts to corporate development. Some coverage was positive, some skeptical. A few op-eds questioned whether Vivian was exploiting a tragedy for PR, whether Eli was qualified, whether the whole thing was performative activism. Eli learned to ignore it mostly. Harder to ignore were the reporters who occasionally showed up at his building, trying to interview neighbors, asking about his past. His mother had been right. They'd dug up everything. Elena's abandonment made it into a Tribune piece about single fathers. His combat injury appeared in a profile about veterans transitioning to civilian work. Even his father's death got mentioned in an essay about generational heroism. The worst was when a reporter approached Lila after school. His sister had been picking her up that day, and some journalist had tried to interview a 7-year-old about her father being a hero. Rosa had threatened to call the police, and the story made local news, media harassment of a child, public outcry, apologies from the news outlet. After that, Vivian's legal team sent cease and desist letters, and the direct harassment stopped. But the damage was done. Lila had nightmares for a week, afraid of strangers, asking questions about why people cared so much about their family. "We're not special," she told Eli one night, tears on her cheeks. "We're just regular people. Why won't they leave us alone?" "Because I did something people think is special, baby girl. But you're right. We are regular people. And eventually they'll get bored and move on to the next story. I promise." He hoped he was right. 6 weeks after starting the job, Eli got a call from Detective Sarah Morrison, the officer handling the shooting case. "We've made an arrest. Marcus Johnson, 23, history of armed robbery and assault. Security footage and witness testimony put him at the scene. We'll be charging him with attempted murder, armed robbery, and assault with a deadly weapon." "You're sure it's him?" "As sure as we can be before trial. But Mr. Turner, I need to prepare you. This is going to bring everything back into the spotlight. Court proceedings, media coverage, possibly testimony from both you and Ms. Cross. Are you ready for that?" "I don't think I have a choice." "No, you don't. But you can prepare yourself emotionally. Talk to Ms. Cross, make sure you're both on the same page. And Mr. Turner, thank you for your cooperation through this investigation. What you did that night was extraordinary." After hanging up, Eli sat in his office trying to process. The shooter had a name now, a face, a history. Marcus Johnson, 23 years old, barely more than a kid, but old enough to point a gun at an unarmed woman. What had driven him to that moment? Desperation, greed, something broken inside that made violence seem like a solution? His door opened without a knock. Vivian stood there, her face pale. "You heard? Detective just called, you too?" She nodded and stepped inside, closing the door. "I knew this was coming, but now that it's real..." She sat down heavily in the chair across from his desk. I'm going to have to face him. In court, across a courtroom, while lawyers ask me to describe the worst moment of my life. And I'm terrified, Eli, not of him specifically, but of reliving it, of being vulnerable in public. You don't have to do it alone. I'll be there. Every court appearance, every testimony, whatever you need. That's not your job. No, Eli agreed. But it's what I'm offering anyway. We went through it together. Makes sense we'd see it through together. Vivian was quiet for a long moment, her composure cracking slightly. I haven't told you this, but I've been having nightmares. About that night, about the gun, about watching you fall. I wake up seeing blood, hearing screams. My therapist says it's normal, that it's PTSD, that it'll fade with time, but now with the arrest, with having to testify, she pressed her hands to her face. I'm supposed to be strong. I'm supposed to be the CEO who has everything together, but I'm just scared. Eli moved around the desk and knelt beside her chair, mindful of his healing shoulder. Hey, being scared doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. You almost died. That's not something you just shake off. You did. You took the bullet and you're fine. I'm not fine. I have nightmares too. Wake up thinking I'm back in Afghanistan, that I failed to protect my unit, that Lila's in danger and I can't reach her. Trauma doesn't care how tough you are. It just is. He waited until she looked at him. But we're both still here. We survived. And we'll survive the trial too. Promise? Promise. She reached out and hugged him then, not carefully, not professionally, but desperately, like he was an anchor in a storm. Eli returned it, feeling her shake slightly, feeling his own fear mixing with hers. They stayed like that for a long moment. Two people who'd been through something terrible together, finding comfort in shared survival. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet but clearer. Thank you for being real with me, for not pretending everything is fine. Everything isn't fine, but it will be. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise, just stubborn. She laughed, the sound watery but genuine. Well, your stubborn wisdom is helpful. Keep it up. She stood, wiped her eyes, pulled herself together with visible effort. I should let you work. But Eli, thank you for everything. After she left, Eli sat at his desk staring at the Chicago skyline. The city looked beautiful from up here, clean lines and gleaming windows, and the river cutting through like a promise. But he knew what existed behind those pretty facades, pain and struggle and people barely holding on. He knew because he'd lived it, because he still lived it even with the new job and better salary. You didn't erase a lifetime of struggle with one lucky break. But maybe you could use that lucky break to help others. Maybe that was the point. Maybe this whole journey, the shooting, the job, the media attention, all of it, was building towards something larger than just his own survival. That evening, he got a call from David Rodriguez, the community outreach coordinator. Eli, I need your help. There's a town hall tomorrow night in Lincoln Park. Residents want to hear about the housing project, and some are hostile. They think we're going to bring in crime, lower property values, destroy the neighborhood character. Ms. Cross was supposed to present, but she's got a board meeting she can't reschedule. Would you be willing to do it? Eli's immediate instinct was to refuse. Public speaking wasn't his strength, and facing hostile residents sounded like torture. But then he thought about what Vivian had said. You're exactly the perspective we need. Yeah, he heard himself say. I'll do it. You sure? This crowd can be rough. I've faced worse. When and where? The next evening, Eli stood in a high school gymnasium facing 200 angry residents. The crowd was mixed. Longtime residents worried about change, newer residents worried about their investments, activists worried about displacement, everyone worried about something. David introduced him, and the murmuring quieted to skeptical silence. Eli stepped to the microphone, acutely aware of his construction worker background, his lack of polish, everything that made him different from the usual corporate presenters. Then he decided to lean into it. I'm Eli Turner. 6 weeks ago, I was a construction worker living in Pilsen, raising my daughter in a small apartment, working 60-hour weeks to make rent. I'm not a developer or a politician or someone who's going to feed you corporate PR. I'm just someone who understands what it's like to need affordable housing, to worry about safety, to want good schools and safe streets for your kids. And that's exactly why Cross Enterprises hired me, to make sure this project serves real people, not just profit margins. The crowd was listening now, some of the hostility fading to curiosity. I know you have concerns, you're worried about crime. I get it, but crime doesn't come from affordable housing. It comes from lack of opportunity, from people feeling hopeless, from communities that don't look out for each other. We're building more than apartments. We're building programs, support systems, partnerships with schools and police and local businesses. We're creating a community. A man in the front row stood up. How do we know this isn't just gentrification with a friendly face? How do we know you won't displace existing residents? We can't prevent all displacement. That's the honest answer. But we're working with tenant advocacy groups, helping existing residents access our units, prioritizing families already living in Lincoln Park. It's not perfect, but it's better than doing nothing while rents keep rising and working families keep getting pushed out. A woman called out, "Why should we trust you? You've been on the job for 6 weeks. What do you know about community development?" Not much, Eli admitted. But I know what it's like to be the family that needs help. I know what it means when nobody gives you a chance. And I know that sometimes the people with all the credentials and experience are the ones who've forgotten what it's like to struggle. I haven't forgotten. I won't forget. More questions came about security, about rent calculations, about timeline and construction impact. Eli answered what he could, admitted when he didn't know, promised to follow up on specific concerns. It wasn't smooth or polished, but it was honest. And slowly, the hostility shifted to cautious engagement. After 2 hours, David called time. People lingered, some approaching Eli with additional questions, a few thanking him for straight answers. One older woman gripped his hand and said, "My son is like you. Works construction, has 3 kids, can barely afford his rent. Maybe this project will help people like him. I hope so." Driving home that night, Eli felt something shift. He'd handled the meeting, not perfectly, but competently. He'd faced skepticism and responded with honesty. He'd done his job. Maybe he really could do this. His phone rang. "Vivian, David called me. Said you were brilliant, that you won over a hostile crowd with authenticity and straight talk. I knew you would. I wasn't brilliant, I just told the truth. That's what makes you brilliant. Most people in your position would have given them corporate speak and empty promises. You gave them yourself, and that matters." She paused. "I'm proud of you, Eli. Really proud." The words settled warm in his chest. "Thanks. That means a lot. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be busy. We've got the design review meeting and then site visits in the afternoon. But tonight, just celebrate the win. You earned it." At home, Lila was already asleep. Eli checked on her, kissed her forehead, stood in her doorway feeling the weight and wonder of how much his life had changed. 2 months ago, he'd been just a construction worker trying to survive. Now he was someone building communities, someone facing down hostile crowds, someone working alongside a billionaire to try to change the world in small but meaningful ways. It was terrifying and exhilarating and nothing like he'd imagined his life would become. But somehow, it felt right. Like all the hard years, all the struggle and sacrifice had been building toward this moment. Not the shooting. That had just been the catalyst. The real moment was this, standing in a doorway watching his daughter sleep, knowing he was building something that mattered, knowing he'd earned his place at the table. Outside, Chicago hummed its endless song. Somewhere in the city, Vivian was probably still working, planning the next phase, driven by whatever demons and dreams pushed her forward. Somewhere, Marcus Johnson sat in a cell awaiting trial. Somewhere, families worried about rent and wondered if they'd still have homes next year. And here, in this small apartment, Eli Turner took a breath and made a quiet promise. He'd do this job right. He'd honor the chance he'd been given. He'd prove that sometimes the least qualified person was exactly the right person, because they hadn't forgotten what it meant to need help. He'd build communities, not just buildings. He'd create safety through connection, not just security cameras. He'd be the bridge between Vivian's resources and the people who needed them most. And maybe, just maybe, he'd prove that heroism wasn't just about one dramatic moment. It was about showing up every day, doing hard work, caring about people, and refusing to give up even when things got difficult. That was the real story. Not the bullet, not the rescue, not the press conferences and media attention. Just a man trying to do right by his daughter, by his community, by the woman who'd given him a chance, and by himself. Everything else was just details. 3 months passed in a rhythm of work and growth and small victories. The Lincoln Park Initiative moved from blueprints to breaking ground. The first ceremonial shovelful of dirt turned on a crisp October morning, with Vivian and the mayor and a crowd of residents watching. Eli stood to the side in a hard hat bearing the Cross Enterprises logo, feeling the strange satisfaction of watching something intangible become real. His job had evolved from abstract planning to concrete action. He'd hired a security team, 4 good people with law enforcement backgrounds who understood that protection was about presence and relationships, not just force. He'd established partnerships with 3 local schools, setting up mentorship programs and after-school activities. He'd organized monthly community dinners where residents could voice concerns and suggestions, creating feedback loops that made people feel heard. The work was harder than construction had ever been, but in different ways. Physical labor exhausted your body, but left your mind clear. This job exhausted everything, required constant thinking, problem-solving, emotional intelligence. But it also filled something in Eli that had been empty for years. Purpose beyond survival. The sense that what he did mattered beyond his own small world. Lila had started dance classes and thrived, pirouetting through their apartment and performing impromptu shows for anyone who'd watch. Eli's shoulder had healed completely, full range of motion restored, though it ached when storms rolled in. He'd moved them to a bigger apartment closer to the Lincoln Park site, still modest by most standards, but with 2 bedrooms and a kitchen where you could actually cook. Lila had her own room for the first time in her life, decorated with posters of dancers and the stuffed lion that had become her most precious possession. His relationship with Vivian had deepened in ways neither of them quite acknowledged. They worked together daily, their professional partnership seamless and productive. But there were moments, coffee runs that turned into hour-long conversations, late nights finishing project proposals when everyone else had gone home, the way she'd touch his arm when making a point and let her hand linger just a second too long, that suggested something more complicated simmering beneath the surface. They never discussed it. Both seemed to understand instinctively that crossing that line would complicate everything, would give ammunition to critics who already questioned their relationship, would risk the good work they were doing together. So they maintained professional boundaries, even as those boundaries felt increasingly arbitrary. The trial was set for November. As the date approached, both Eli and Vivian grew quieter, more tense, the prospect of reliving that night hanging over them like a storm cloud. Detective Morrison had prepared them for what to expect. Defense attorneys trying to paint Marcus Johnson as desperate rather than dangerous. Media circus. Graphic photos of Eli's injury. Questions designed to shake their testimony. Just tell the truth, Morrison advised during a prep session. Don't embellish. Don't minimize. Just describe what happened exactly as you remember it. The trial began on a Monday morning that felt too normal for what it represented. Eli wore a suit his mother had insisted on buying, sat in the courtroom with Vivian beside him, and watched Marcus Johnson enter in an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. This was the man who'd tried to kill Vivian, who'd shot Eli, who'd changed both their lives irrevocably. He looked younger than his 23 years, thin and scared, nothing like the monster Eli had built up in his mind. The prosecution opened strong, painting a picture of premeditated robbery turned violent. Security footage showed Johnson following Vivian from the restaurant, waiting for his moment. Witness testimony described the chaos, the screams, Eli's intervention. The defense countered with Johnson's troubled background, foster care, homelessness, mental health struggles, a society that had failed him long before he picked up a gun. Both narratives were true, Eli realized. Johnson was a criminal who'd made terrible choices. And he was also a kid the system had chewed up and spit out, someone who'd never had a real chance. That complexity made everything harder. It would have been easier if he could just hate the guy. Vivian testified on day 3. Eli watched her take the stand, poised and controlled even as her hands trembled slightly. She described the evening clearly, clinically, until the prosecutor asked her to describe the moment she thought she would die. Her voice cracked then. I saw the gun. I knew what it meant. And I thought, this is it. This is how I die, on a street in my own city, and no one will even remember why. Just another crime statistic. She paused, gathering herself. Then Eli appeared. I didn't see where he came from. One second the gun was pointed at me, the next he was there pushing me aside, taking the bullet that was meant for me. And I watched him fall, and I thought, this stranger just died for me. This man I've never met just gave his life for mine. But he didn't die, the prosecutor said gently. No, but he could have. He took that risk without hesitation, without knowing if he'd survive. That's what I think about every day. That someone cared enough about another human being, about me, to risk everything. The defense attorney cross-examined, trying to find inconsistencies, suggesting she'd embellished details, questioning whether Johnson had actually intended to shoot or just frighten. Vivian held firm, her composure returning as she calmly refuted each implication. By the time she stepped down, the jury looked convinced. Eli testified the next day. Walking to the stand felt surreal, like watching himself in a movie. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, then sat facing a room full of strangers waiting to judge his story. The prosecutor walked him through the events methodically. What he'd been doing that night, what he'd seen, why he'd intervened, what he remembered after being shot. Mr. Turner, in that moment when you saw the gun pointed at Ms. Cross, what went through your mind? Nothing, Eli said honestly. There wasn't time to think. I just saw someone in danger and reacted. Training from the army, maybe, or just instinct. I didn't decide to be a hero. I just couldn't stand there and watch someone get killed. Were you afraid? Not then. Fear came later in the hospital when I thought about what could have happened, about my daughter growing up without a father. But in the moment, no time for fear. The defense attorney was harder on him, questioned his motives, suggested he'd been seeking glory or recognition, asked if he'd known who Vivian was, implying the rescue had been calculated rather than instinctive, tried to paint him as an unreliable witness because he'd been in shock and bleeding. Eli answered each question calmly, refusing to be rattled. He'd faced worse interrogations in military debriefings. This was just another test, another moment requiring him to stay steady under pressure. Mr. Turner, isn't it true you've benefited significantly from this incident? New job, substantial salary increase, media attention? I was offered a job because Ms. Cross believed I was qualified, not as payment for saving her life, and the media attention has been mostly intrusive and unwanted. I didn't ask to become a news story. But you accepted the job because it was a good opportunity to help people. That's what I try to do, help people. Sometimes that means taking a bullet. Sometimes it means building communities. The principle is the same. By the time he stepped down, Eli felt drained but satisfied. He'd told the truth. Whatever the jury decided, he'd done his part. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Expert witnesses analyzed the security footage frame by frame. Medical experts described Eli's injuries in graphic detail. Character witnesses spoke about Johnson's troubled past and Vivian's philanthropy and Eli's military service. The prosecution built a case of attempted murder. The defense argued for reduced charges based on diminished capacity and lack of intent to kill. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, community members, people who'd followed the story and wanted to see how it ended. Eli sat with Vivian, their hands almost but not quite touching on the armrest between them. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. Vivian exhaled shakily. Eli felt tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying released from his shoulders. Guilty. Justice, whatever that meant, had been served. Johnson was sentenced to 15 years with possibility of parole after 10, not as much as the prosecution wanted, more than the defense hoped for. A compromise that satisfied no one but seemed fair in its own complicated way. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Vivian made a brief statement thanking the jury and prosecution, expressing hope that Johnson would get help during his incarceration, acknowledging the complexity of the case. Eli said nothing, just stood beside her, a silent presence of support. Later, in her car driving away from the circus, Vivian finally broke down. She pulled into an empty parking lot and cried, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere primal. Eli didn't try to stop her or comfort her with words, just held her while she shook, letting her release everything she'd been holding in for months. "I'm sorry," she finally said, pulling back and wiping her eyes. "I don't know where that came from. You almost died. You've been reliving it for months. You testified in front of strangers. That would break anyone." "I don't feel broken. I feel relieved, like I can finally breathe again, like that chapter is closed and I can move forward." "Then that's good." She looked at him, really looked at him, her eyes still wet but clearing. "You've been my anchor through all of this. You know that, right? Every time I felt like I couldn't handle it, you were there, just steady and strong and refusing to let me fall apart. You did the same for me. Did I? I feel like I've been taking more than I've given. You gave me a chance when no one else would have. You trusted me with something important. That's not nothing, Vivian." Her name felt intimate in the enclosed space of the car, like crossing a line they'd carefully avoided. She seemed to feel it too, something shifting in the air between them. "Eli, She stopped, seeming to reconsider. "We should celebrate. The trial's over, we got justice, and we survived. Let me take you somewhere, not tacos this time, somewhere nice." "Vivian, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to. Please, let me do something for you that isn't about work or obligation. Just two people who've been through something terrible together, marking the end of it." There was something in her voice, some undercurrent of need or hope or possibility that made Eli nod. "Okay, but I'm warning you, I don't own anything fancy enough for whatever place you're thinking of. You look perfect exactly as you are." She took him to a restaurant on the top floor of a downtown hotel, the kind of place with white tablecloths and wine lists longer than novels, and prices that made Eli's eye twitch. The host recognized Vivian immediately, led them to a private table by the windows with views of Chicago spreading out below them in a carpet of lights. "This is too much," Eli said as they sat down. "It's exactly right. You've been dealing with my world for months now, meetings and corporate culture and all that nonsense. Tonight, I want to show you the parts that are actually enjoyable." They ordered, or rather, Vivian ordered for them both, navigating the menu with ease while Eli tried not to think about what each course probably cost. Wine arrived, then appetizers that looked too beautiful to eat. Vivian relaxed as the meal progressed, the stress of the trial lifting from her shoulders like a physical weight. "Tell me something," she said over the main course. "If none of this had happened, if there'd been no shooting, no job offer, no trial, what would you be doing right now?" "Same thing I was doing before. Construction work, struggling to pay rent, trying to give Lila a decent life, maybe dreaming about something better but not really believing it was possible. Do you miss it? The simplicity of that life?" Eli considered the question honestly. Sometimes, there's something to be said for knowing exactly what your life is, even if it's hard. No surprises, no complications, but no, I don't really miss it. This life is better, harder in different ways, but better. And us? Do you ever wish we'd stayed strangers? The question hung between them, weighted with everything they hadn't said. Eli met her eyes across the table. "No. Never. You changed my life, Vivian, for the better. Whatever complications came with it, that was worth it. You changed mine too, and not just by saving it. You reminded me why I do this work, why I built my company, why I care about affordable housing. I'd gotten so caught up in the business of building that I'd forgotten the purpose. You brought me back to that." The conversation shifted to lighter topics. Lila's dance recital coming up, Vivian's upcoming business trip to San Francisco, memories of growing up in their respective neighborhoods. But underneath the casual talk, something hummed between them, an awareness that had been building for months and was now impossible to ignore. After dinner, Vivian suggested a walk despite the November cold. They left the hotel and wandered through downtown Chicago, past late-night office workers and couples heading to shows and the ever-present homeless asking for change. Vivian gave money to each person they passed, never breaking stride, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "My mom used to do that," Eli said. "Give money to everyone, even when we barely had any ourselves. I asked her once why, and she said, because I've been that desperate, and I remember how much it meant when someone helped. Your mom sounds like a wise woman. She is. Worked hard her whole life, raised 4 kids mostly alone after my dad died, never complained. She's my hero, honestly. More than any soldier or firefighter, just someone who showed up every day and did what needed to be done. That's what you do too. You know that, right? You show up, you do hard things, you take care of people. That's heroism in its truest form. They found themselves on the Riverwalk, the path quiet this late at night, the water dark and glittering with reflected lights. Vivian stopped at a railing and looked out at the city she'd built her empire in. "Can I tell you a secret?" she said quietly. "I've been terrified for months, not just about the trial, but about everything. About whether I'm doing this right, whether the Lincoln Park project will actually help people or just be another well-intentioned failure. About whether I'm good enough, smart enough, whether I deserve what I have. You built a multi-billion-dollar company from nothing. I think that proves you're enough. Money doesn't prove anything except that I'm good at business. But being good at making money doesn't mean I'm good at making a difference." She turned to face him. "You make me want to be better, Eli. Not just at work, but as a person. You look at the world with this fundamental decency that I thought I'd lost somewhere along the way. And being around you reminds me that it still exists, that people still care about each other for no reason except that it's the right thing to do. Vivian, I know this is complicated. I know there are about 17 good reasons why we shouldn't, why this isn't—" She stopped, frustrated with herself. "I'm not good at this, at being vulnerable, at admitting that I feel something I'm not supposed to feel." Eli's heart was racing. They were standing at a precipice, about to cross a line that would change everything. Part of him wanted to step back, to maintain the boundaries they'd carefully constructed. But a larger part, the part that had run toward danger instead of away from it, wanted to take the leap. "What do you feel?" he asked quietly. Vivian looked at him, and in her eyes he saw everything she hadn't said, the gratitude and respect that had slowly transformed into something deeper, something that scared them both because of how real it felt. "I feel like the woman in the red dress who thought she was going to die," she said, "and you're the man who saved her life. But also I feel like I'm Vivian, and you're Eli, and we're just 2 people who've been through something profound together. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I started caring about you in ways that have nothing to do with bullets or jobs or gratitude, and that terrifies me." "Why does it terrify you?" "Because people will say I'm taking advantage of you, that the power dynamic is wrong, that you only care about me because you feel obligated or because I gave you a job, because it could ruin what we've built professionally, because—" her voice broke slightly, "because I don't know how to be in a relationship that matters. I've always been too focused on work, too driven, too much, and I don't want to hurt you." Eli stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "Vivian, I took a bullet for you before I knew your name. That was an obligation. That was just who I am, someone who protects people when they need it. And yes, you gave me a job and I'm grateful, but that's not why I—" He paused, making himself say it. "That's not why I've been fighting the urge to kiss you for the past 2 months." Her eyes widened. "You have?" "Of course I have. You're brilliant and beautiful and complicated and real. You drive me crazy with your perfectionism, and you make me laugh, and you care about people even though you pretend you're all business. How could I not feel something?" The power dynamic is only a problem if we let it be. Yes, you're my boss, but we're also equals. We both know what it's like to struggle, to fight for what matters, to build something from nothing. Your money doesn't make you better than me, and my lack of it doesn't make me less than you. We're just 2 people trying to do good work and figure out our lives." Vivian was crying again, but this time with something like relief or hope. "This is a terrible idea." "Probably. People will talk. The media will have a field day. Let them talk. It could complicate everything we're trying to build, or it could make it stronger, give us more reason to succeed." She laughed through her tears. "When did you become so wise about relationships? You haven't dated anyone in years." "That's because I've been waiting for someone worth the risk." He reached up and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "And Vivian, you're worth every risk." She kissed him then, or maybe he kissed her. Later, neither could remember who moved first. It didn't matter. What mattered was the feeling of finally acknowledging what had been building between them for months, of crossing the line they'd been dancing around and finding that the other side wasn't frightening at all. It felt right. It felt inevitable. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vivian rested her forehead against his. "We're really doing this?" "If you want to." "I want to. God help me. I really want to. But Eli, we have to be smart about this. Keep it private for now. Make sure we're not just caught up in trauma bonding or gratitude or whatever. Make sure it's real." "It's real for me. Has been for a while." "For me too." She smiled, and it was the most genuine, unguarded expression he had ever seen on her face. "Okay, let's try this. Slowly, carefully, and probably with more complications than either of us can imagine. But let's try." They walked back to her car, hand in hand, no longer maintaining professional distance. Just two people who'd found something unexpected in the aftermath of tragedy. She drove him home, and they sat in the car outside his building for another hour, talking about everything and nothing, making plans and acknowledging fears, being vulnerable in ways that felt both terrifying and necessary. When Eli finally went upstairs, it was past midnight. His apartment was quiet, Lila asleep in her room with her door cracked open the way she liked. He checked on her, kissed her forehead, then collapsed onto his bed feeling like his entire world had shifted again. The shooting had changed his life, the job had changed his circumstances. But this, whatever was starting with Vivian, felt like it might change him at a fundamental level. Make him believe that good things could happen not just because you fought for them, but because you were open to possibilities you'd never imagined. He fell asleep thinking about her smile, about the way she'd looked at him on the Riverwalk, about the future they might build together if they were brave enough to try. The next 6 months unfolded like a story neither of them had written, but both contributed to page by page. They kept their relationship private at first, just quiet dinners and stolen moments, learning each other beyond their professional roles. Vivian met Lila officially, not as Eli's boss, but as someone important to him. Lila loved her immediately, asking when they could see her again, talking about the lady in the red dress who'd given her the lion. The Lincoln Park initiative progressed. Buildings rose from empty lots, steel frames becoming walls, becoming homes. Eli's programs took shape, security patrols that knew residents by name, youth programs that gave kids alternatives to gang involvement, community spaces where people gathered and connected. It wasn't perfect. There were problems, conflicts, moments when Eli wondered if they were really making a difference. But slowly, undeniably, a community was forming. Media eventually caught wind of Eli and Vivian's relationship. The headlines were predictable. Billionaire and hero. A love story born from tragedy when the woman in red found her savior. Some coverage was sympathetic, some cynical, all of it invasive. But they weathered it together, refusing to let outsiders define their relationship or turn it into entertainment. Eli's mother had been skeptical at first, worried about the complications and differences, but watching Vivian with Lila, patient and genuine, never condescending, treating a 7-year-old like her thoughts mattered, had won her over. "She's good for you," Maria told Eli one Sunday when they were all having dinner at her apartment. "Makes you smile in a way I haven't seen since before the army. Just be careful, mijo. Love between different worlds is always complicated." "All love is complicated, Mom." "True, but some complications are worth it." One evening in May, almost a year after the shooting, Vivian invited Eli to a charity gala. He'd avoided most of her high society events, uncomfortable with the wealth and pretension. But this one mattered to her, a fundraiser for housing initiatives across the Midwest, a cause that aligned with everything they were building together. Eli wore a tuxedo his sister had helped him pick out, feeling like an imposter, but determined to support Vivian. The event was at a luxury hotel, the ballroom filled with Chicago's elite, CEOs and politicians and old money families who'd never known struggle. Eli recognized a few faces from the news, felt wildly out of place, and then saw Vivian across the room and forgot to be nervous. She wore a dress the same shade of red as the one from that night, a deliberate choice that made several guests murmur. When she saw Eli, her face lit up in a way that made the discomfort worth it. She crossed the room and took his hand. "You came. Said I would." "I know, but I was half convinced you'd change your mind, hate these things. I do hate them, but I love you, so here I am. It was the first time he'd said it out loud. They'd been dancing around the words for months, both feeling it, but neither quite ready to make it that real. Vivian's eyes went wide, then soft. You love me? Yeah. Probably have since you brought those croissants to my apartment. Maybe even since you cried over me in the rain, but definitely now. I love you too, she said, and her voice carried wonder like she couldn't quite believe it was true. I love you and your daughter and your stubborn honor and the way you make me want to be better. We're at a fancy gala. This is probably not the time. This is exactly the time. She kissed him right there in front of Chicago's elite, making a statement that their relationship was real and serious and not something to be hidden or ashamed of. When they broke apart, the ballroom had gone quiet, everyone staring. Vivian turned to face the room, still holding Eli's hand. I know what you're all thinking, that we're an unlikely couple, that our relationship is complicated by how we met and who we are. And you're right. It is complicated, but it's also real and important and built on mutual respect and shared values. Eli makes me a better person and a better leader, and I hope I do the same for him. So yes, we're together, and we're not apologizing for it. The silence broke into awkward applause and whispered conversations. Some faces showed approval, others skepticism. Eli didn't care. He'd faced worse than society's judgment. What mattered was the woman beside him, the future they were building, the knowledge that sometimes the most unlikely connections became the strongest bonds. The gala continued, and Vivian worked the room with Eli at her side, introducing him not as her employee, but as her partner. Some people were gracious, others barely concealed their disdain. One older man in a tuxedo that probably cost more than Eli's truck made a snide comment about social climbing through heroics. Vivian shut him down with a smile that had edges. Eli Turner has more integrity in his little finger than most people in this room have in their entire bodies. He risked his life for a stranger. He's building communities that will help thousands of families. What have you done lately besides inherit money and judge people? The man sputtered and walked away. Vivian squeezed Eli's hand. Sorry, I know you can fight your own battles, but that guy has been a thorn in my side for years, and I enjoyed shutting him up. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Too late. You're stuck with me now, for better or worse. Sounds like a marriage vow. Does it? She looked at him with something playful and serious in her eyes. Would that be so terrible? Eli's heart jumped. They'd been together less than a year. It was too soon to be talking about marriage. Except it didn't feel too soon. It felt exactly right, like everything in his life had been leading to this moment, this woman, this future. No, he said carefully, that wouldn't be terrible at all. Good to know. She pulled him toward the dance floor. Come on. If we're going to scandalize society, we might as well dance while we do it. They danced, and Eli was surprised to find he didn't completely embarrass himself. Vivian guided him through the steps, patient with his mistakes, laughing when he stepped on her foot. Around them, Chicago's elite watched and whispered and judged. But inside their small circle of two, none of that mattered. Later that night, standing on Vivian's penthouse balcony overlooking the city that had brought them together, Eli thought about everything that had changed in 1 year. He'd been shot, changed careers, found love, built something meaningful. He'd gone from barely surviving to actually living, from isolation to connection, from just existing to having purpose. What are you thinking? Vivian asked, coming up beside him with 2 glasses of wine. That a year ago I was just a construction worker trying to pay rent. And now I'm here, with you, building communities and planning futures. It doesn't seem real sometimes. It's real. Sometimes the best things feel impossible until they happen. She handed him a glass. 2 unlikely journeys. And the people we meet along the way. They clinked glasses and drank, and Eli felt something settle in his chest. Contentment, maybe, or just the quiet knowledge that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. 6 months later, the first Lincoln Park building opened its doors to residents. 30 families moved in over the course of 2 weeks, filling empty units with furniture and life and hope. Eli was there every day, greeting people, helping carry boxes, making sure everyone felt welcome and safe. It was exhausting and exhilarating and exactly what he'd been working toward. On the official opening day, they held a ceremony with speeches and ribbon cutting and the mayor praising Vivian's vision. But the moment Eli remembered most clearly was later that evening, after the crowds left, when a woman named Maria, not his mother, but another Maria, a single mom with 3 kids, approached him with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. "This place, this chance, it's everything. My kids will have good schools, safe streets, a real home. You have no idea what that means." "I do know," Eli said gently. "I've been where you are. I understand." "Then you know you're changing lives, not just mine. Hundreds of families. You're a real hero, Mr. Turner." After she left, Vivian found Eli standing alone in the new community center, staring at the space that would host programs and gatherings and all the small interactions that built communities. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah. Just thinking about how far we've come, how much has changed." "Do you regret any of it? The shooting, the media attention, all the complications?" Eli thought about the question seriously. The bullet wound still ached sometimes. The media scrutiny had been awful. The transition from construction work to corporate leadership had been brutal. But standing here in this building they'd created, knowing families had safe homes because of their work, having Vivian beside him and Lila thriving and a future full of purpose, no. He didn't regret any of it. "Not even for a second," he said. Vivian moved closer, wrapped her arms around him. "Good. Because I have a question for you, and I need you to be sure about us before I ask it." "What kind of question?" She pulled back and reached into her pocket, pulled out a small box. Eli's breath caught. She opened it to reveal a simple silver band, elegant but not ostentatious, exactly his style. "Eli Turner, you saved my life, and then you changed it. You made me believe in people again, made me remember why any of this matters. You're the best man I've ever known. And I want to spend the rest of my life building things with you, communities and families and a future worth living. Will you marry me?" Eli felt tears prick his eyes. A year and a half ago, he'd been alone, struggling, resigned to a life of barely getting by. Now a brilliant, beautiful woman who'd built an empire was asking him to be her partner in everything. It should have felt impossible. Instead, it felt inevitable, like every hard thing in his life had been preparing him for this moment. "Yes," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Absolutely yes." She slipped the ring on his finger and they stood there in the empty community center holding each other. 2 people who'd survived violence and found love, who'd built something meaningful from tragedy, who'd proven that sometimes the most unlikely stories became the most beautiful ones. Outside, Chicago hummed its endless song. Somewhere in the city, families were settling into new homes with hope for the future. Somewhere, construction continued on 2 more buildings that would house 200 more families. Somewhere, Lila was at his mother's apartment, probably driving everyone crazy with her boundless energy and questions. And here, in this moment, Eli Turner held the woman he loved and thought about his father running into that warehouse, about his mother working hard jobs to support her family, about the long line of people who'd shown him what courage and love and sacrifice looked like. He thought about a rainy night and a split-second decision and how 3 seconds could change everything. He thought about bullets and blood and a woman in a red dress crying over a stranger. He thought about risks and chances and the way life surprised you when you stopped expecting anything good. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing something in me worth saving. Not that night with the bullet, that was just instinct. But after. For giving me a chance when you didn't have to. For trusting me. For loving me." "You saved me first," Vivian said. "I just returned the favor." But they both knew it was more than that. They'd saved each other in ways that had nothing to do with bullets and everything to do with hope, with seeing the best in each other, with choosing love even when it was complicated and risky and likely to be judged by people who didn't understand. They'd built something rare, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and the knowledge that both of them were better together than apart. Not because either needed saving anymore, but because they'd chosen each other, freely and fully, with eyes wide open to all the complications and challenges ahead. That was the real story. Not the dramatic rescue or the unlikely romance or the rags to riches narrative the media loved. The real story was two people who'd faced darkness and chosen light, who'd been given second chances and made something beautiful from them, who proved that heroism wasn't just about one moment of courage, but about showing up every day to do hard, important work. A year later, they married in a small ceremony at the Lincoln Park Community Center, surrounded by family and friends and residents whose lives they'd touched. Lila was flower girl, scattering petals and grinning at the crowd. Eli's mother cried happy tears. Vivian's employees filled half the seats, the other half packed with people from the neighborhood who'd come to celebrate. When Eli slipped the ring on Vivian's finger and she slipped one on his, when they promised to love and honor each other through whatever came next, it felt like the culmination of a journey that had started with violence but transformed into something transcendent. They kissed to thunderous applause, and Eli thought about how far they'd come from that rainy street, from fear and blood and strangers helping strangers. At the reception, his mother pulled him aside. "Your father would be so proud of you, mijo. Not for taking the bullet, though yes, for that too, but for everything you've built since, for the man you've become. I learned it from you and him, from everyone who showed me that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard. And now you'll teach that to Lila, and to all the people whose lives you touch through your work. That's how we change the world, one person at a time, one choice at a time, one act of courage or kindness that ripples outward in ways we can't predict." Later, dancing with Vivian under strings of lights in the community center they'd built together, Eli felt a profound sense of gratitude and purpose. This was his life now. Not perfect, still complicated, full of challenges ahead, but meaningful, important, worth every risk he'd taken and every moment of fear and doubt. "Happy?" Vivian asked, her head on his shoulder. "More than I ever thought possible." "Good, because I have news. We're breaking ground on 3 more projects next year: Boston, Detroit, Minneapolis. I want you to lead community development for all of them." Eli pulled back to look at her. "That's huge. Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything. Well, except marrying you. You've proven what's possible when someone with genuine connection to communities leads this work. I want to replicate it, scale it, help more families. With you as my partner." "Our partner," Eli corrected. "This isn't just your company anymore. It's ours. Everything we build together." "Together," she agreed and kissed him again. And around them their community celebrated the joining of 2 lives that had come together through tragedy and transformed it into hope. The story could have ended there, in that moment of happiness and promise. But life doesn't end with weddings or neat conclusions. It continues forward, day by day, choice by choice, building something larger than any one moment or person. Eli and Vivian went on to transform affordable housing across the Midwest, creating communities that balance safety with dignity, economic reality with human need. Lila grew up surrounded by love and purpose, eventually studying social work and continuing the mission her father and stepmother had started. The Lincoln Park Initiative became a model copied in a dozen cities, proof that with vision and commitment and genuine care for people, change was possible. But what mattered most, what would always matter most, wasn't the buildings or the programs or the media acclaim. It was the simple fact that on one rainy night, a man had chosen to run toward danger instead of away from it, and that choice had rippled outward in ways neither he nor the woman he saved could have imagined. Heroes weren't people who never felt fear. They were people who felt it and acted anyway, who saw someone in need and couldn't look away, who believed that one person really could make a difference. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, that one moment of courage opened doors to everything you'd never dared to dream. A new life, a great love, a purpose that mattered, and the knowledge that you'd left the world better than you found it. That was Eli Turner's story. That was their story. And it started with 3 seconds in the rain and a choice that changed everything.